One of humanity's greatest scientific advances was the development of iron metallurgy, which drastically changed the course of ancient civilizations. Although metalworking had been controlled by bronze for more than 1,000 years, everything from military strategies to agricultural practices would finally undergo a revolution when ironwork techniques were discovered and refined in the Anatolian highlands in the middle of the 2nd and 1st millennia BC. Archaeological records from approximately 1500 BC provide the earliest indications of intentional iron production in Hittite Empire-controlled areas. The Hittites created systematic methods for collecting iron from terrestrial, or OES, as opposed to the unintentional production of iron from meteoric sources or as a byproduct of copper smelting. The mountainous regions of central Anatolia provided abundant iron ore deposits, particularly hematite and magnetite, which became the foundation for this emerging technology. Archaeological excavations at Kankalahu, located in the Kera province of modern Turkey, have yielded crucial insights into early iron production methods. The site contains stratified layers dating from the Middle Bronze Age through the Iron Age, providing a clear chronological sequence of technological development. Within the Hittite period levels, archaeologists have uncovered sophisticated furnace structures that represent some of the earliest purpose-built iron smelting installations known to scholarship. These early furnaces, known as bloomer furnaces, operated on principles fundamentally different from bronze working equipment. The bloomer process required temperatures exceeding 1150 degrees C to reduce iron ore into workable metal. The Hittite furnaces discovered at Kalhoyuk feature thick clay walls reinforced with organic temper, designed to withstand the extreme heat necessary for iron reduction. Bellows systems operated by human power forced air through ceramic tiers inserted into the furnace walls, creating the oxygen-rich environment essential for efficient smelting. The bloomer process produced a spongy mass of iron called a bloom, which contained both metallic iron and slag inclusions. Skilled smiths would then reheat this bloom and repeatedly hammer it to expel the slag, gradually consolidating the iron into workable bars. This labor-intensive process required considerable expertise, explaining why early iron production remained concentrated in specialized workshops under royal or temple patronage. The Hittite Empire's control over iron technology provided significant strategic advantages during the Late Bronze Age. Hittite texts from Bogaskoi, the ancient capital Hattusa, reference iron as a precious commodity, sometimes more valuable than gold. The famous correspondence between Hittite king Hattusile III and an Assyrian ruler includes references to iron gifts, suggesting that the Hittites carefully controlled the distribution of iron objects and possibly the knowledge of ironwork techniques themselves. The superiority of iron over bronze became apparent through practical application rather than immediate recognition. Early iron tools and weapons possessed several distinct advantages that gradually became evident to ancient craftsmen and warriors. Iron ore deposits occurred far more frequently in nature than the tin required for bronze production. While copper was relatively abundant, tin sources remained scarce and geographically concentrated, creating supply chain vulnerabilities that affected entire civilizations. The tin trade routes stretching from Cornwall in Britain to the Caucasus Mountains represented complex networks that could be disrupted by warfare, political instability, or natural disasters. Iron tools demonstrated superior edge retention compared to bronze implements. A properly forged iron blade could maintain its sharpness through extended use, while bronze tools required frequent resharpening. This advantage proved particularly significant for agricultural implements such as plowshares and sickles, where consistent cutting performance directly impacted productivity. Iron plowshares could break heavier soils that would damage bronze equivalents, enabling cultivation of previously unsuitable lands. The military applications of iron technology created profound shifts in ancient warfare. Iron spearheads and sword blades possessed greater structural integrity than bronze weapons, reducing the likelihood of catastrophic failure during combat. An iron sword could penetrate bronze armor more effectively, while iron armor provided superior protection against bronze weapons. However, the transition was gradual rather than immediate, as early ironworking techniques produced metal of inconsistent quality. The process of carburization, though not fully understood by ancient smiths, occasionally created steel-like alloys when iron absorbed carbon during the smelting or forging process. These accidentally produced high-carbon ions demonstrated exceptional hardness and cutting ability, providing glimpses of iron's true potential. Archaeological analysis of early iron artifacts reveals varying carbon content, indicating that ancient smiths had not yet developed consistent methods for controlling the metallurgical properties of their products. Beyond Anatolia, independent centers of iron development emerged in the Caucasus region during the same period. The mountainous terrain between the Black and Caspian Seas contained rich iron ore deposits, and local populations developed their own approaches to iron extraction and working. Archaeological sites in Georgia, particularly in the Samtsky-Javakheti region, have yielded evidence of iron production dating to approximately 1400 BC. The Caucasian iron working tradition appears to have developed independently from Hittite techniques, suggesting that the transition to iron represented a technological inevitability rather than a single innovation. The Caucasian smiths developed distinctive furnace designs adapted to local conditions and/or types. These furnaces, often built into hillsides to take advantage of natural draft, achieve the high temperatures necessary for iron reduction through ingenious engineering solutions. Archaeological evidence from sites like Savo and Tralee in Georgia reveals sophisticated ironworking operations that produce both tools and weapons. The quality of Caucasian ironwork improved rapidly, with later artifacts showing evidence of deliberate heat treatment and quenching techniques that enhance the metal's properties. The geographical position of the Caucasus, straddling major trade routes between Europe and Asia, facilitated the spread of ironwork knowledge to neighboring regions. The Levant emerged as another crucial region for early iron adoption and development. Archaeological excavations at Tel Amer in Jordan have uncovered iron artifacts dating to approximately 1300 BC, indicating that iron technology had reached this region. During the Late Bronze Age, the transition appears to have been gradual, with iron objects initially serving ceremonial or prestige functions before becoming common utilitarian items. The site of iron whorefairs in Israel has yielded evidence of local iron production, dating to the 12th century BC. The furnace remains discovered at this site demonstrate that Lentine smiths had mastered the bloomer process and were producing iron on a significant scale. The archaeological context suggests that iron production was integrated into existing bronze working operations, with smiths adapting their facilities and techniques to accommodate the new technology. Trade networks played a crucial role in disseminating ironwork knowledge throughout the ancient world. Merchant communities, particularly those engaged in metal trading, served as vectors for technological transfer. The complex commercial relationships that had developed around bronze production provided ready-made channels for introducing iron technology to new regions. The collapse of the Late Bronze Age palace economies around 1200 BC may have accelerated the adoption of iron technology. As traditional bronze supply chains became disrupted, communities sought alternative sources for metal tools and weapons. Iron's abundance and local availability made it an attractive substitute for increasingly scarce bronze. This transition period, often called the Late Bronze Age collapse, coincided with widespread adoption of iron technology across the Eastern Mediterranean. Maritime peoples, including those groups collectively known as the Sea Peoples, likely contributed to the spread of iron technology through their extensive travels and military campaigns. Archaeological evidence suggests that some seas groups possessed iron weapons, which may have provided tactical advantages during their conflicts with established Bronze Age powers. The gradual improvement in ironwork techniques during this period reflects the accumulated experience of multiple generations of smiths. Early iron artifacts often show evidence of experimental approaches, with smiths testing different smelting temperatures, forging techniques and heat treatments. This period of technological development laid the groundwork for the more sophisticated ironwork traditions that would emerge during the subsequent centuries. The economic implications of iron adoption extended far beyond metallurgy itself. Communities with access to iron technology could produce more efficient agricultural tools, leading to increased food production and population growth. The military advantages of iron weapons altered the balance of power between neighboring groups. While the relative affordability of iron tools democratized access to metal implements that had previously been luxury items, regional variations in ironwork techniques began to emerge as different communities adapted the basic technology to local conditions and preferences. These variations would eventually develop into distinct metallurgical traditions, each contributing unique innovations to the broader evolution of iron technology. The sophisticated bronze-working civilizations that had dominated the Eastern Mediterranean for centuries faced unprecedented challenges as the 13th century BC drew to a close. The The carefully maintained trade networks that supplied tin from distant sources began experiencing systematic disruptions, while mysterious maritime raiders appeared along coastlines from Anatolia to Egypt. Archaeological evidence from sites across the region reveals a pattern of destruction, abandonment, and cultural transformation that fundamentally altered the political landscape of the ancient world. The Bronze Age collapse, as modern scholars term this period of widespread upheaval, manifested differently across various regions, but shared common characteristics of urban destruction, population displacement, and the breakdown of centralized authority. At Ugarit, the prosperous Syrian port city that had served as a crucial hub for international trade, excavations reveal a sudden and violent end around 1185 BC. The royal palace archives, preserved under collapsed masonry, contain frantic correspondence describing approaching enemies and desperate pleas for military assistance that never arrived. The final tablets from Ugarit's archives paint a vivid picture of the crisis engulfing the eastern Mediterranean. A letter from the king of Elashia to the Ugaritic ruler describes enemy ships ravaging the coastline, while another document records the departure of Ugarit's own fleet to assist the Hittite Empire, leaving the city defensively vulnerable. The archaeological record confirms this narrative of abandonment and destruction, with thick ash layers covering the final Bronze Age occupation levels throughout the urban center. Similar patterns of destruction appear at numerous sites across the Aegean and Anatolia. The Mycenaean palaces of mainland Greece, including Chios, Tyre, and Mycenae itself, show evidence of violent destruction during the late 13th and early 12th centuries BC. At Pios, the Linear B archives were baked by the fires that consumed the palace, inadvertently preserving detailed records of the kingdom's final administrative activities. These tablets reveal a society mobilizing for defense, with references to coastal watches, military preparations, and the movement of bronzesmiths to secure locations. The identity and origins of the groups responsible for this widespread destruction remain subjects of scholarly debate, but Egyptian sources provide crucial contemporary accounts of the maritime raiders known collectively as the Sea Peoples. The mortuary temple of Ramesses III at Medina Habu contains detailed reliefs and inscriptions describing the pharaoh's battles against these invaders around 1180 BC. The Egyptian text names specific groups, including the Peliset, Techa, Shechlesh, Denian, and Vashesh, describing them as peoples who had destroyed the Hittite Empire and devastated the Levantine coast before advancing toward Egypt. The Medinet Habu reliefs depict the Sea Peoples as a diverse coalition employing both naval and land-based warfare. Their ships, characterized by distinctive high prows and sterns decorated with bird heads, appear alongside ox-drawn carts carrying families and possessions, suggesting migration rather than mere raiding. The warriors wear feathered headdresses, carry around shields, and wield long swords, presenting a martial appearance distinct from traditional Egyptian or Near Eastern military equipment. Egyptian accounts describe the Sea People's military tactics as emphasizing mobility and coordination between naval and terrestrial forces. The reliefs show their ships attacking Egyptian vessels in the Nile Delta, while simultaneous land campaigns advanced along the coastal routes. This combined approach proved devastatingly effective against the static, defensive systems of Bronze Age kingdoms which had been designed primarily to resist conventional siege warfare rather than rapid, multi-directional assaults. The Hittite Empire, which had controlled much of Anatolia and northern Syria for over 3 centuries, collapsed completely during this period. The capital at Hattusa was abandoned around 1180 BC, with archaeological evidence suggesting systematic destruction of major buildings and the deliberate dismantling of defensive installations. Unlike sites that show evidence of sudden violent destruction, Hattus appears to have been evacuated in an organized manner, with valuable objects removed and archives deliberately buried for preservation. The collapse of Hittite authority created a power vacuum across Anatolia that numerous smaller groups rushed to fill. Neo-Hittite city-states emerged in southeastern Anatolia and northern Syria, maintaining certain cultural and political traditions while adapting to the changed circumstances. These successor states, including Kamish, Latia, and Samol, controlled smaller territories than the unified empire, but demonstrated remarkable resilience in preserving Hittite administrative practices and artistic traditions. The fragmentation of the Hittite Empire accelerated the spread of ironwork technology throughout Anatolia and beyond. The centralized control that had previously restricted access to iron production techniques disappeared with the collapse of royal authority. Smiths who had worked under palace patronage found themselves free to establish independent workshops or seek employment with emerging local rulers. This decentralization of expertise led to rapid technological diffusion as ironwork knowledge spread to regions previously excluded from access to advanced metallurgy. Archaeological evidence from sites like Alaka Hoyuk and Bogus Khoi shows a marked increase in iron artifact production following the Hittite collapse. The quality of ironwork improved significantly during this period, suggesting that smiths were experimenting with new techniques and refining their methods without the constraints of imperial standardization. The New Kingdom's empire in the Levant contracted substantially with Egyptian control, limited to isolated strongholds and coastal enclaves. This retreat created opportunities for local populations to establish independent political entities and develop their own technological capabilities without Egyptian oversight. The Philistines, identified by many scholars as one of the Sea Peoples groups mentioned, in Egyptian sources established a confederation of city-states along the southern Levantine coast, following their unsuccessful invasion of Egypt. Archaeological excavations at sites like Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gath have revealed a distinctive material culture combining iron traditions with local Levantine elements. Significantly, these sites show early adoption of iron technology, with iron artifacts appearing in 12th century BC contexts. The Philistine adoption of iron technology appears to have been systematic rather than gradual. Archaeological evidence suggests they possessed iron-working capabilities from the earliest phases of their settlement in the region. This technological advantage may have contributed to their military success against neighboring populations and their ability to establish and maintain independent city-states despite pressure from surrounding groups. In the Levant, more broadly, the collapse of Egyptian hegemony and the destruction of major Canaanite cities created opportunities for new political formations to emerge. The highland regions of central Palestine, previously sparsely settled, experienced significant population growth during the 12th and 11th centuries BC. These highland settlements, which many scholars associate with the emergence of early Israelite society, show evidence of iron tool adoption for agricultural purposes, particularly in the form of plough, shares, and other farming implements. The technological advantages of iron tools became particularly apparent in the challenging environment of the Palestinian highlands. Iron ploughshares could break the rocky terra rosa soils that characterized much of the region far more effectively than bronze implements. This capability enabled the cultivation of previously marginal lands, supporting the population growth evident in the archaeological record of highland sites during this period. The fragmentation of large territorial states into smaller political entities fundamentally altered the dynamics of technological diffusion in the ancient Near East. Where the Hittite Empire had maintained centralized control over iron production, the successor states competed with one another for technological advantages. This competition encouraged innovation and experimentation as smiths sought to develop superior products for their patrons. The city-state of Kamish, one of the most successful Neo-Hittite entities, maintained extensive trade connections that facilitated the spread of ironwork techniques throughout northern Syria and southeastern Anatolia. Excavations at the site have revealed sophisticated ironwork installations dating to the 11th and 10th centuries BC, including furnaces designed specifically for iron production, rather than adapted from bronze working facilities. Similar patterns of technological development appear at other Neo-Hittite centers. At Zinkuri, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of large-scale iron production during the early Iron Age, with workshops producing both utilitarian tools and decorative objects. The quality of ironwork from these sites demonstrates rapid advancement in metallurgical techniques, with smiths developing methods for producing consistently high-quality iron products. The transformation of the Eastern Mediterranean world during the Late Bronze Age collapse created conditions that fundamentally accelerated the transition from bronze to iron technology. The disruption of established trade networks, the collapse of centralized political authority, and the emergence of new competitive political entities combined to create an environment where technological innovation provided crucial advantages for survival and prosperity. The collapse of Mycenaean civilization around 1200 BC ushered in what historians traditionally call the Greek Dark Ages, though recent archaeological discoveries have revealed this period to be far more complex and dynamic than the term suggests. While the great palace centers of Pylos, Tyron, and Mycenae lay abandoned, Smaller communities across the Greek mainland islands and Anatolia began the slow process of cultural and technological reconstruction that would eventually give birth to classical Greek civilization. The most striking characteristic of early Dark Age Greece was the apparent loss of literacy. The linear B crypt used by Mayan administrators disappeared entirely, leaving no written records for nearly 4 centuries. This absence of textual evidence initially led scholars to characterize the period as one of complete cultural collapse. But archaeological excavations have painted a more nuanced picture of gradual transformation rather than total abandonment of civilized life. At Lefandi on the island of Euboea, excavations have revealed remarkable evidence of continued prosperity and international connections during the supposed Dark Ages. The site's most spectacular discovery, a massive upsidal building dating to around 1000 BC, measured over 45 meters in length and contained rich burial deposits including gold jewelry, bronze vessels and iron weapons. The building's construction required sophisticated architectural knowledge and substantial community resources, contradicting earlier assumptions about universal poverty and isolation during this period. The burials at Lefandi demonstrate that some Greek communities maintained access to luxury goods and exotic materials throughout the Dark Ages. A particularly remarkable burial known as the Heruan contained a cremated male warrior accompanied by an inhuman female along with 4 horses. The grave goods included bronze vessels from Cyprus, gold ornaments, and iron weapons indicating trade connections stretching across the eastern Mediterranean despite the collapse of the Mycenaean palace system. Iron technology played a crucial role in the gradual recovery of Greek civilization during the Dark Ages. Archaeological evidence from sites like Athens, Argos, and Knos shows iron artifacts becoming increasingly common in burial contexts from the 11th century BC onward. Initially, iron objects served primarily as prestige items, with elaborate iron swords and spearheads appearing in the graves of elite warriors alongside traditional bronze weapons. The Athenian Kerameio cemetery provides exceptional documentation of this technological transition. Excavations in the proto-geometric levels have revealed graves containing both bronze and iron weapons, with iron gradually becoming more prevalent over time. The quality of ironwork improved significantly during this period, with smiths developing techniques for producing consistently harder and more durable weapons than their bronze predecessors. The production of iron in Dark Age Greece appears to have been initially concentrated in specific regions with access to all sources or specialized knowledge. The island of Euboea, with its iron deposits in the Durface Mountains, emerged as a major center of iron production and trade. Archaeological surveys have identified numerous slag heaps and furnace remains dating to the 10th and 9th centuries BC, indicating large-scale iron smelting operations that supplied communities throughout the Central Iron. The gradual improvement in ironwork techniques during the Dark Ages reflected both technological experimentation and the accumulation of practical experience. Early Greek iron artifacts show considerable variation in quality, suggesting that smiths were still learning to control the complex processes involved in iron production. By the 9th century BC, however, Greek ironwork had achieved a level of sophistication comparable to contemporary products from established metallurgical centers in Anatolia and the Levant. The demographic recovery that began during the later Dark Ages created conditions favorable for renewed urban development and political organization. Archaeological surveys across Greece reveal a substantial increase in settlement numbers and sizes, beginning around 900 BC. This population growth coincided with improvements in agricultural productivity, partly attributable to the adoption of iron plowshares and other farming tools that could work heavier soils more effectively than bronze implements. The emergence of the Greek police system during the 8th and 7th centuries BC represented a fundamental innovation in political organization that would profoundly influence subsequent Western political thought. Unlike the centralized palace kingdoms of the Bronze Age, the palace was conceived as a community of citizens who participated collectively in governance and military defense. This new political model created unprecedented demands for military equipment and civic infrastructure, driving further innovations in iron technology and urban planning. Athens provides an excellent case study of Polish development during the Archaic period. The Athenian agora, which would become the heart of the classical city's political and commercial life, began taking shape during the 8th century BC. Early structures included simple buildings for public gatherings and religious activities, But the site's development accelerated dramatically during the 7th and 6th centuries, as Athens evolved from a collection of villages into a unified urban centre. The Athenian transition to iron technology occurred gradually but systematically during the early Archaic period. Excavations in the Agora have revealed numerous ironworking installations dating to the 7th and 6th centuries BC, including furnaces, anvils, and large quantities of slag and other production debris. The concentration of metallurgical activity in specific areas of the city suggests that iron production was becoming increasingly specialized and organized on a larger scale than during the Dark Ages. Sparta's development during the Archaic period followed a markedly different trajectory from Athens, reflecting the unique geographical and social conditions of the Laconian region. The Spartan polis emerged through the conquest and incorporation of surrounding territories, creating a militarized society that placed exceptional demands on weapons production and military technology. Archaeological evidence from Spartan sites reveals intensive iron production focused primarily on military equipment rather than civilian tools. The Spartan military system that developed during the 7th century BC required standardized weapons and armor for its citizen soldiers. Iron spearheads, sword blades, and armor components found at Spartan sites show remarkable consistency in design and quality, indicating centralized production standards that ensured battlefield effectiveness. The famous Spartan shield, made of bronze but reinforced with iron fittings, became a symbol of the polis's military prowess throughout the Greek world. Corinth's strategic position on the narrow isthmus connecting the Peloponnese to central Greece made it a natural center for trade and manufacturing during the Archaic period. The city's potters developed distinctive artistic styles that were exported throughout the Mediterranean, while its metalworkers produced high-quality bronze and iron goods for both domestic use and international trade. Archaeological excavations in Corinth have revealed extensive industrial quarters with evidence of large-scale iron production dating to the 7th and 6th centuries BC. The Corinthian iron industry benefited from the city's extensive trade, connections which provided access to high-quality ores from various sources. Analysis of iron artifacts from Corinth reveals metal derived from multiple ore sources, including local deposits in the Peloponnese and imported materials from Anatolia and the Black Sea region. This diversity of raw materials allowed Corinthian smiths to experiment with different iron types and develop specialized alloys for specific applications. The Great Colonization movement that began in the 8th century BC fundamentally transformed the cultural and economic landscape of the Mediterranean world. Greek communities driven by population pressure, land shortage, and commercial opportunities established settlements from the Western Mediterranean to the Black Sea coast. These colonies served not only as outlets for excess population, but also as centers for resource extraction and trade network expansion. Massalia, founded by Phocaean Greeks around 600 BC on the southern coast of modern France, exemplifies the colonization movement's commercial motivations. The colony's strategic location near the mouth of the Rhone River provided access to trade routes extending deep into continental Europe, including regions rich in metals and other valuable commodities. Archaeological evidence from Massalia reveals extensive iron facilities that processed both local ores and imported materials, producing goods for trade with indigenous populations throughout southern Gaul. The establishment of Greek colonies along the Black Sea coast opened access to the rich iron ore deposits of the Pontic region. Keronessos, founded on the Crimean Peninsula in the 6th century BC, became a major center for iron production and trade. The colony's workshops processed ores from nearby deposits and manufactured iron tools and weapons for export throughout the Greek world. The high quality of Pontic iron made it particularly prized for military applications, with Keronessos becoming a major supplier of weapons to Greek city-states. The colonization movement also facilitated the spread of Greek ironwork techniques to indigenous populations throughout the Mediterranean. At settlements like Emperon in northeastern Spain and Hyskopium on the Iberian coast, Greek colonists established workshops that produced iron goods using local materials. These operations often employed indigenous workers who learned Greek metallurgical techniques and subsequently established their own production centers. The development of the hoplite system during the 7th century BC revolutionized Greek warfare and created new demands for standardized military equipment. The hoplite was a heavily armed infantryman equipped with a large round shield, spear, sword, and bronze armor. This military system required iron weapons of consistent quality and durability, driving innovations in metallurgy and weapons manufacturing throughout the Greek world. The hoplite spear, typically measuring 2.5 to 3 m in length, featured an iron spearhead designed for thrusting attacks in close formation. Archaeological analysis of hoplite spearheads reveals sophisticated metallurgical techniques, including selective hardening of the point and edges, while maintaining a softer, more flexible core. This combination provided optimal performance in the dense combat formations characteristic of hoplite warfare. The hoplite sword known as a Zephus represented another significant advancement in iron weapon technology. These short double-edged blades were designed for close combat when the primary spear was broken or lost. Greek swordsmiths developed techniques for creating blades with hard cutting edges and flexible cores, achieving a level of metallurgical sophistication that rivaled contemporary weapons from any part of the ancient world. The production of hoplite equipment required substantial resources and specialized skills, creating new economic opportunities for metal workers throughout the Greek world. Cities like Chelsea or Nubia became renowned for their weapons production, with the term Chalcidian becoming synonymous with high-quality iron weapons. The standardization requirements of hoplite warfare drove the development of consistent production techniques and quality control measures that advanced the overall level of Greek metallurgy. The tactical advantages provided by iron weapons became particularly apparent in conflicts between Greek city-states and their neighbors, who still relied primarily on bronze equipment. The superior cutting power and durability of iron weapons gave Greek hoplites significant advantages in battle, contributing to the military successes that enabled Greek expansion throughout the Mediterranean region. The evolution of Greek warfare during the Archaic period also involved innovations in defensive equipment that incorporated iron technology. While the basic hoplite shield remained bronze, iron reinforcements and fittings became increasingly common. Iron shield bands, grip reinforcements, and decorative elements not only strengthened the shield, but also reduced its overall weight compared to purely bronze construction. The development of ironwork technology in archaic Greece was closely connected to broader patterns of economic and social change that transformed Greek society during this period. The growth of trade, the emergence of coinage, and the development of more complex political institutions all contributed to increased demand for metal goods and more sophisticated production techniques. The introduction of coinage to the Greek world during the 7th century BC created new demands for precious metals while simultaneously providing standardized media of exchange that facilitated trade in iron goods. Cities like Aina and Athens began minting silver coins that could be used to purchase raw materials and finish products from distant sources, enabling Greek metalworkers to access high-quality OES and expand their production capabilities. The social changes accompanying the rise of the polar system also influenced iron technology development. The emergence of a broader class of citizen soldiers who could afford hoplite equipment created mass markets for standardized weapons and armor. This democratization of military service, compared to the elite warrior culture of the Bronze Age, required production techniques capable of supplying large numbers of soldiers with reliable equipment. Regional variations in Greek ironworking traditions began to emerge during the Archaic period, as different city-states developed specialized techniques and products. Athenian smiths became known for their decorative ironwork, including elaborate fibula and ornamental weapons. Spartan metalworkers focused on producing functional military equipment with minimal ornamentation but maximum battlefield effectiveness. Corinthian workshops developed techniques for producing iron goods in large quantities for export markets. These regional specializations created networks of technological exchange that spread innovations throughout the Greek world. Traveling craftsmen carried new techniques from city to city, while trade connections facilitated the distribution of specialized products and raw materials. The competitive environment of the polar system encouraged continuous innovation as cities sought to gain advantages over their rivals through superior technology and production capabilities. The technological innovations and competitive dynamics that had transformed Greek society during the Archaic period were simultaneously reshaping another maritime civilization that would prove equally influential in spreading Iron Age technology throughout the Mediterranean world. Along the eastern shores of the Mediterranean, in the narrow coastal strip between the Lebanon mountains and the sea, a collection of city-states had been developing into the ancient world's most sophisticated maritime trading network. The Phoenicians, inheritors of Canaanite Bronze Age traditions, adapted rapidly to the new iron technology while maintaining their dominance of long-distance commerce through innovations in navigation, shipbuilding, and urban organization. The three great Phoenician city-states of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblo each developed distinct specializations while maintaining the cooperative relationships necessary for their collective maritime supremacy. Byblo, the northernmost of the major centers, had established itself as the primary intermediary for Lebanese cedar exports and Egyptian papyrus imports during the Bronze Age. Archaeological excavations at the site have revealed continuous occupation from the Neolithic period through the Roman era, with the Iron Age levels showing substantial urban development and evidence of large-scale metalworking operations. The transition to iron technology at Byblo occurred gradually during the 11th and 10th centuries BC, with bronze and iron implements appearing together in archaeological contexts before iron gradually predominated. Excavations in the city's residential quarters have uncovered numerous ironwork installations, including furnaces specifically designed for iron smelting rather than adapted from bronzework facilities. The quality of iron artifacts from Byblo improved dramatically during the 10th century BC, indicating that local smiths had mastered the complex techniques required for consistent iron production. Sidon, located approximately 40 kilometers south of Byblos, emerged as the preeminent center for Phoenician glass production and purple dye manufacturing during the early Iron Age. The city's workshops produced glass vessels, beads, and decorative objects that were traded throughout the Mediterranean world, while its purple dye operations processed millions of murex shells to create the costly pigment that became synonymous with royal and aristocratic status. The integration of iron tools into these industrial processes significantly improved productivity and product quality. The purple dye industry at Sidon required enormous quantities of murex shells, which were harvested from offshore beds using specialized techniques developed by Phoenician divers and fishermen. Iron knives and scrapers proved far superior to bronze tools for the delicate process of extracting the dye-producing organs from the shells without damaging the precious secretions. Archaeological excavations in Sidon's industrial quarters have revealed massive accumulations of crushed murex shells alongside iron tools, specifically designed for dye production, indicating the scale and sophistication of these operations. Tyre, the southernmost of the great Phoenician centers, developed into the most powerful and influential of the city-states during the early Iron Age. The city's unique geography, situated on an island connected to the mainland by a narrow causeway, provided exceptional natural defenses while maintaining easy access to both maritime and terrestrial trade routes. Tyrian merchants established trading posts and colonies throughout the western Mediterranean, creating a commercial network that would eventually span from Spain to the Black Sea. The urban development of Iron Age Tyre reflected the city's growing prosperity and international connections. Excavations have revealed sophisticated harbor installations with stone quays, warehouses, and shipbuilding facilities that could accommodate the largest vessels of the ancient world. The city's residential areas featured multi-story buildings constructed with ashlar masonry, while public buildings demonstrated architectural influences from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Anatolia, reflecting Tyre's cosmopolitan character. Phoenician shipbuilding technology incorporated iron fittings and tools that significantly improved vessel construction and performance. Iron nails and clamps provided stronger joints than the traditional bronze equivalents, while iron tools enabled more precise woodworking and hull shaping. The famous Phoenician merchant vessels known as galloi featured broad hulls optimized for cargo capacity, rather than speed, with iron reinforcements that allow them to carry heavier loads over longer distances than previous ship designs. The navigation techniques developed by Phoenician mariners represented another crucial technological advancement that enabled their Mediterranean expansion. Phoenician navigators combined traditional coastal piloting methods with innovations in celestial navigation, using iron instruments to measure stellar positions and maintain course during long ocean voyages. The development of accurate navigation techniques was essential for the establishment of distant colonies and trading posts that form the backbone of the Phoenician commercial empire. Archaeological evidence from Phoenician sites reveals the systematic application of iron technology to various industrial processes beyond basic tool and weapon production. At Serpa, located between Tyre and Sidon, excavations have uncovered extensive workshops for pottery production, metalworking, and textile manufacturing. The pottery kilns at Serpa incorporated iron fittings that allowed more precise temperature control, resulting in higher quality ceramics that were exported throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. The Phoenician adoption of alphabetic writing systems during the early Iron Age facilitated the administration of their far-flung commercial networks and contributed to the spread of literacy throughout the Mediterranean world. The Phoenician alphabet, derived from earlier Protoconite scripts, consisted of 22 consonantal letters that could be easily learned and adapted to different languages. Iron styluses and engraving tools enabled the production of more durable inscriptions on stone, metal, and other materials, while the simplicity of the alphabetic system made it accessible to merchants and administrators who required practical literacy for commercial purposes. The establishment of Carthage around 814 BC marked the beginning of Phoenician expansion into the Western Mediterranean on an unprecedented scale. According to later Roman historical accounts, particularly those of Livy and Justin, Carthage was founded by Tyrian colonists led by a queen named Dido. Though the archaeological evidence suggests a more gradual process of settlement and urban development, the site chosen for the new city on a peninsula extending into the Bay of Tunis provided excellent natural harbours and defensive positions, while maintaining access to the fertile Bradas River Valley. Early Carthage developed rapidly from a trading post into a major urban centre through the systematic application of Phoenician expertise in commerce, manufacturing, and urban planning. Archaeological excavations in the city's Bursa Hill area have revealed 8th century BC occupation levels, with evidence of substantial buildings and organised street layouts. The early settlers brought with them advanced ironwork techniques that enabled the production of tools and weapons superior to those available to the indigenous Berber populations. The Carthaginian economy during the early colonial period was based primarily on trade rather than territorial conquest. Following traditional Phoenician commercial practices, Carthaginian merchants established trading relationships with indigenous populations throughout North Africa, exchanging manufactured goods, including iron tools and weapons, for raw materials such as gold, ivory, and exotic animals. These commercial relationships gradually evolved into more formal political arrangements as Carthage expanded its influence throughout the region. The development of Carthaginian agriculture in the fertile valleys surrounding the city represented a significant departure from traditional Phoenician reliance on maritime commerce. Carthaginian farmers, many of whom were indigenous Berbers who had adopted Carthaginian culture, developed innovative agricultural techniques that maximize productivity in the Mediterranean climate. Iron plowshares and other agricultural implements enabled the cultivation of previously marginal lands, supporting population growth and urban expansion. The Carthaginian military system that emerged during the 7th and 6th centuries BC combined traditional Phoenician naval expertise with innovations in land warfare adapted to North African conditions. Carthaginian armies typically consisted of citizen militia forces, supplemented by professional soldiers, recruited from throughout the Mediterranean world. The diversity of Carthaginian military forces reflected the cosmopolitan nature of the empire, with units of Numidian cavalry, Balearic slingers, GIC infantry, and other specialized troops serving alongside Carthaginian citizens. Iron weapons played a crucial role in Carthaginian military success, providing technological advantages over many of their opponents who still relied primarily on bronze equipment. Carthaginian smiths developed distinctive weapon designs that combined Phoenician metallurgical traditions with influences from various Mediterranean cultures. The famous falca swords, used by some Carthaginian units with their curved blades optimized for slashing attacks, demonstrated the sophisticated metallurgical techniques available to Carthaginian weaponsmiths. The expansion of Carthaginian influence throughout the Western Mediterranean during the 6th and 5th centuries BC created a commercial empire that rivaled the territorial empires of the Eastern Mediterranean. Carthaginian trading posts and colonies extended from southern Spain to Sicily, with each settlement serving as a node in a vast network of commercial relationships. The standardization of weights, measures, and currency throughout this network facilitated trade while spreading Carthaginian cultural and technological influences to diverse populations. The Carthaginian presence in Spain, centered on the city of New Carthage, provided access to some of the richest mineral deposits in the ancient world. The silver mines of the Sierra Morena and the Rio Tinto region produced enormous quantities of precious metals that funded Carthaginian expansion and military operations. Iron tools and techniques introduced by Carthaginian colonists revolutionized Spanish mining operations, enabling the extraction of OES from deeper and more complex deposits than had been previously accessible. The relationship between Carthage and the indigenous Iberian populations evolved from simple trading partnerships to more complex political and military alliances. Carthaginian influence introduced iron technology, urban planning concepts, and agricultural innovations to Iberian communities, while Iberian warriors and craftsmen contributed their expertise to Carthaginian military and commercial operations. This cultural exchange created hybrid societies that combined elements of both Carthaginian and Iberian traditions. The Carthaginian expansion into Sicily brought them into direct conflict with Greek colonies that had been established on the island since the 8th century BC. The competition for control of Sicilian cities and territories led to a series of wars that would continue intermittently for centuries. These conflicts demonstrated the military effectiveness of iron weapons and the strategic importance of controlling key Mediterranean islands for maintaining commercial networks. The Battle of Himera in 480 BC marked a significant turning point in Carthaginian-Greek relations in Sicily. The Carthaginian army led by Hamilcar included substantial numbers of troops equipped with iron weapons and supported by a large fleet. Despite their technological advantages, the Carthaginians suffered a devastating defeat that temporarily ended their expansion in Sicily. The battle demonstrated that military success required not only superior equipment, but also effective tactical coordination and strategic planning. The development of Carthaginian naval technology during the 5th and 4th centuries BC incorporated significant innovations in ship design and naval warfare tactics. Carthaginian warships known as quinqueremes featured 5 banks of OES and bronze rams reinforced with iron fittings. These vessels were larger and more heavily armed than most contemporary warships, providing Carthage with naval superiority throughout much of the western Mediterranean. The Carthaginian harbour installations at Carthage itself represented the pinnacle of ancient naval engineering. The circular military harbour connected to a rectangular commercial harbour could accommodate over 200 warships, while providing complete protection from both weather and enemy attacks. The harbour facilities included covered shipyards, warehouses, and administrative buildings, all constructed with iron tools and fittings that ensured durability and functionality. The economic foundation of the Carthaginian Empire rested on the systematic exploitation of Mediterranean trade routes and the development of manufacturing centres that produced goods for export throughout the known world. Carthaginian workshops produced textiles, metalwork, pottery, and other manufactured goods using techniques that incorporated the latest technological innovations. The standardization of production methods and quality control measures enabled Carthaginian manufacturers to compete effectively with Greek and other Mediterranean producers. The Carthaginian monetary system based on silver and gold coins, minted to consistent standards, facilitated trade throughout the Mediterranean world while providing a stable medium of exchange for international commerce. Carthaginian coins featured distinctive designs that advertised the city's power and prosperity, including images of ships, horses, and palm trees that symbolized the sources of Carthaginian wealth and influence. The gradual expansion of Roman power throughout the Italian peninsula during the 4th and 3rd centuries BC inevitably brought Rome into conflict with Carthaginian interests in the western Mediterranean. The First Punic War, which began in 264 BC, originated from disputes over control of Sicily, but quickly escalated into a comprehensive struggle for Mediterranean supremacy. The war demonstrated the crucial importance of naval power and the technological innovations that would determine the outcome of ancient conflicts. The Roman development of naval capabilities during the First Punic War required the rapid adoption of advanced shipbuilding techniques and the training of crews capable of operating complex warships. Roman engineers studied captured Carthaginian vessels to understand their construction methods, while Roman shipyards worked to produce fleets capable of challenging Carthaginian naval supremacy. The Roman systematic approach to technological adoption and their ability to mobilize vast resources ultimately enabled them to compete effectively with the more experienced Carthaginian navy. The Second Punic War, beginning in 218 BC, represented the climactic confrontation between Rome and Carthage for control of the Mediterranean world. Hannibal's famous crossing of the Alps with his army, including war elephants, demonstrated Carthaginian strategic innovation and military audacity. The Carthaginian forces that invaded Italy were equipped with the finest weapons and equipment available, including iron swords, spears, and armor that had been perfected through centuries of warfare throughout the Mediterranean region. The defeat of Hannibal's forces at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC marked the end of Carthaginian dominance in the Mediterranean. But across the Alps and beyond the familiar territories of classical civilization, another Iron Age culture had been developing sophisticated metallurgical traditions and expanding across vast territories of Europe. The Celtic peoples emerging from the temperate forests and river valleys of Central Europe had been quietly mastering iron, technology, and creating distinctive artistic traditions that would influence European culture for centuries to come. The Hallstatt culture, named after the Austrian lakeside village where archaeologists first identified its characteristic artifacts, represented the earliest phase of Celtic Iron Age development. Beginning around 800 BC, this culture emerged in the region encompassing modern Austria, southern Germany, eastern France, and parts of Switzerland and the Czech Republic. The geographical heart of Hallstatt culture lay in the mineral-rich territories of the Eastern Alps, where abundant iron ore deposits and salt mines provided the economic foundation for a flourishing civilization. The Hallstatt salt mines, located in the Salamagutt region of Austria, have yielded extraordinary archaeological evidence of early Celtic industrial capabilities. The preservation conditions within the salt mines have maintained organic materials that would normally decay, providing unprecedented insights into Hallstatt daily life and technology. Excavations have recovered wooden mining tools, leather caps and clothing, rope made from plant fibers, and even the preserved remains of miners who died in ancient caverns. The mining operations at Hallstatt required sophisticated engineering and organizational capabilities. The Celtic miners constructed elaborate wooden support systems to prevent tunnel collapses, while bronze and iron tools enabled them to extract salt from increasingly deep and complex underground chambers. The scale of these operations is evident from the massive spoil heaps surrounding the ancient mine entrances, indicating continuous extraction over several centuries. Iron tools revolutionized salt mining productivity at Hallstatt. Iron picks and hammers could break through rock formations that would have dulled or broken bronze implements, while iron-reinforced wooden handles provided greater durability under the constant stress of mining operations. The superior cutting power of iron tools enabled miners to carve more precise tunnels and chambers, reducing the risk of structural failures that had plagued earlier mining efforts. The wealth generated by salt production and iron ore extraction supported the development of a stratified Hallstatt society with distinct social classes and specialized craft production. Archaeological excavations at Hallstatt period sites reveal substantial differences in burial practices and grave goods that reflect social hierarchies based on control of mineral resources and trade networks. Elite burials contain elaborate bronze and iron weapons, imported luxury goods, and evidence of feasting activities that demonstrate the concentration of wealth among a warrior aristocracy. The Hallstatt cemetery itself, discovered in 1846, contained over 2,000 burials spanning several centuries of Celtic occupation. The graves range from simple inhumations with minimal grave goods to elaborate chamber tombs filled with weapons, jewelry, and imported artifacts. The richest burials, dating to the 7th and 6th centuries BC, contained iron swords with decorated bronze hilts, bronze vessels imported from Italy, and amber ornaments from the Baltic region, indicating extensive trade connections throughout Europe. The development of distinctive Hallat iron-working traditions, built upon earlier Bronze Age metallurgical knowledge, while incorporating innovations that improve both the quality and quantity of iron production. Hallstatt Smith developed furnace designs specifically adapted to local or types and fuel sources, achieving temperatures and reduction conditions that produced consistently high-quality iron. Archaeological evidence from production sites reveals the systematic use of water-powered bellows and carefully controlled smelting, processes that maximized iron yield from available OEs. The characteristic Hallstatt iron sword, known as the Hallstatt Type C sword, represented a significant advancement in European weapon technology. These swords featured long, straight blades designed for both cutting and thrusting attacks with bronze hilts, decorated in distinctive geometric patterns. The metallurgical analysis of surviving examples reveals sophisticated techniques for creating blades with hard-cutting edges and flexible cores, achieving a level of performance that rivaled contemporary weapons from more established metallurgical centers. Hallstatt metalworkers also developed innovations in defensive equipment that reflected the martial culture of Celtic society. Iron spearheads, often exceeding 40 centimeters in length, were designed for use in organized infantry formations, while bronze and iron shield bosses provided protection for warriors equipped with large wooden shields. The standardization evident in many Hallstatt weapons suggests organized production systems that could equip substantial military forces with consistent high-quality equipment. The artistic traditions that developed within Hallstatt culture combined indigenous European motifs with influences from Mediterranean civilizations encountered through trade relationships. Hallstatt craftsmen created elaborate bronze vessels decorated with geometric patterns and stylized animal figures, while iron objects featured inlaid bronze decorations that demonstrated sophisticated metalwork techniques. The integration of artistic and functional elements in Hallstatt metalwork established aesthetic traditions that would continue throughout the Celtic Iron Age. The expansion of Hallstatt influence throughout Central Europe occurred through a combination of population movement, trade relationships, and cultural diffusion that spread Celtic languages, technologies, and artistic traditions across vast territories. Archaeological evidence indicates that Hallstatt communities established settlements in regions far from the original Alpine heartland, carrying with them the knowledge and techniques that enabled local iron production and the adoption of Celtic cultural practices. The Hinterberg, located in southwestern Germany along the upper Danube River, exemplifies the urban development that characterized later Hallstatt culture. This fortified settlement, occupied from the 7th to 5th centuries BC, featured sophisticated defensive walls constructed with Mediterranean-inspired masonry techniques. The site's excavations have revealed evidence of large-scale iron production, craft specialization, and long-distance trade that connected the Celtic world with Greek and Etruscan civilizations. The defensive walls at Hinterberg incorporated architectural elements derived from Greek colonial cities, including rectangular towers and gates designed according to Mediterranean military engineering principles. The adoption of these foreign architectural concepts demonstrates the cosmopolitan character of late Hallstatt society and the willingness of Celtic elites to incorporate useful innovations from other cultures. Iron tools and weapons found at the site show clear influences from Mediterranean metallurgical traditions while maintaining distinctively Celtic decorative elements. The transition from Hallstatt to Latin culture around 450 BC marked a significant transformation in Celtic artistic expression and technological capabilities. The Latin culture, named after a site on Lake Newell in Switzerland, developed distinctive art styles that combined Celtic traditions with influences from Greek, Etruscan, and Eastern European cultures encountered through expanded trade networks and population movements. The latent artistic revolution manifested most dramatically in metalwork, where Celtic craftsmen developed flowing curvilinear designs that departed radically from the geometric patterns characteristic of Hallstatt art. Latin metalworkers created elaborate torques, best patterns, stylized animal forms, and abstract motifs that would become synonymous with Celtic culture. The technical sophistication required to produce these intricate designs reflected advances in metallurgical techniques and artistic training that elevated Celtic craftsmanship to new levels of achievement. The famous Batisi shield discovered in the Tempermays River near London exemplifies the artistic and technical achievements of Latin metal workers. This bronze shield, decorated with flowing patterns, executed in repousse technique, features complex designs that required exceptional skill in both artistic conception and metalworking execution. The shield's construction incorporated iron reinforcements that provided structural strength while maintaining the decorative bronze surfaces that displayed the owner's wealth and status. Latin swordsmiths developed new weapon designs that reflected both technological innovations and changing military tactics. The Latine long sword, typically measuring 70-80 cm in length, featured a straight, double-edged blade designed primarily for slashing attacks. These swords required advanced metallurgical techniques to create blades that combined flexibility with cutting power. While their elaborate scabbards demonstrated the artistic sophistication of Celtic decorative traditions, the production of Latine swords involved complex processes that combined iron working with bronze decoration and organic materials. The sword blades were forged from iron using techniques that created optimal hardness distributions, while the hilts incorporated bronze, wood, and leather components assembled with iron fittings. The scabbards, often made from bronze sheets decorated with intricate Latine patterns, protected the blades while serving as displays of the owner's wealth and artistic taste. Celtic social organization during the Latena period centered around warrior aristocracies that controlled territorial kingdoms and maintained their power through military prowess and the patronage of skilled craftsmen. Archaeological evidence from elite burial sites reveals the central importance of weapons and warrior equipment in Celtic society with elaborate grave goods that included complete sets of military equipment, alongside symbols of political and religious authority. The Vix burial discovered in Burgundy, France represents one of the most spectacular examples of Celtic elite culture during the transition from Hallstatt to Latin periods. The burial chamber, dating to around 500 BC, contained the remains of a woman accompanied by a massive bronze crater weighing over 200 kilos, along with gold jewelry, bronze vessels, and iron weapons. The crater, likely manufactured in a Greek workshop, demonstrates the extensive trade connections that linked Celtic elites with Mediterranean civilizations. The Druids, the learned class of Celtic society, played crucial roles in maintaining cultural traditions, legal systems, and religious practices throughout the Celtic world. While direct archaeological evidence for Druidical collectivities remains limited, classical authors like Caesar and Pliny provide detailed accounts of Druidical functions and their importance in Celtic society. The Druids' responsibilities included legal arbitration, religious ceremonies, education, and the preservation of oral traditions that maintained cultural unity across diverse Celtic communities. The role of iron tools in Celtic agricultural expansion cannot be overstated. Iron ploughshares enabled Celtic farmers to cultivate the heavy, fertile soils of northern Europe that had been largely inaccessible to Bronze Age agriculture. The superior cutting power and durability of iron agricultural implements supported population growth and territorial expansion that carried Celtic culture from Ireland to Anatolia over the course of several centuries. Celtic ironworking techniques varied considerably across different regions, reflecting local ore sources, fuel availability, and cultural preferences. In areas with abundant bog iron, such as Ireland and northern Britain, Celtic smiths developed specialized techniques for processing this distinctive ore type. Bog iron formed through natural processes in wetland. Environments required different smelting approaches than the hard rock ores, common in alpine regions, leading to regional variations in furnace design and production methods. The spread of Celtic peoples across Europe during the Latin period created a vast network of related cultures that shared common languages, artistic traditions, and technological practices while maintaining regional distinctiveness. Celtic expansion reached its greatest extent during the 4th and 3rd centuries BC, with Celtic settlements extending from the Atlantic coasts of Ireland and Spain to the Black Sea region and central Anatolia. The Celtic migration into the Italian peninsula during the 4th century BC brought them into direct contact with Roman civilization and provided opportunities for technological and cultural exchange. Celtic warriors, known to the Romans as Gauls, established settlements in the Po Valley and periodically raided Roman territories, creating military pressures that influenced Roman military development and political organization. The famous sack of Rome by Bryce in 387 BC demonstrated Celtic military capabilities and the effectiveness of their iron weapons against Roman forces. Celtic settlements in Anatolia, established by migrants who crossed the Bosphorus in the 3rd century BC, created the Kingdom of Galatia that maintained Celtic cultural traditions in an Eastern Mediterranean context. Archaeological excavations at Galatian sites have revealed material culture that combines Celtic artistic traditions with influences from Greek, Persian, and local Anatolian cultures, demonstrating the adaptability of Celtic society to diverse geographical and cultural environments. The Celtic expansion into Britain and Ireland occurred over several centuries and involved multiple waves of migration that introduced Latini culture to populations that had previously maintained Bronze Age traditions. The archaeological record reveals gradual adoption of Celtic languages, artistic styles, and technological practices throughout most of Britain. While Ireland developed distinctive regional variations of Latin culture that incorporated indigenous traditions, the hill forts that became characteristic features of the Celtic landscape throughout Europe represented sophisticated defensive systems that incorporated the latest military engineering techniques. Sites like Maiden Castle in Dorset, England, and Bra in France featured multiple defensive circuits, elaborate gate systems, and internal organization that could accommodate substantial populations during periods of conflict. The construction of these fortifications required iron tools for earthwork and timber preparation, while their defense relied on iron weapons and armor. The economic foundation of Celtic society rested on a combination of agriculture, craft production, and trade that generated sufficient wealth to support specialized warriors, craftsmen, and religious personnel. Celtic communities developed sophisticated systems for iron production, agricultural management, and craft specialization that enabled them to compete effectively with Mediterranean civilizations while maintaining their distinctive cultural identity. The integration of iron technology into Celtic agricultural practices transformed European farming and supported the population densities necessary for territorial expansion and urban development. Celtic farmers developed crop rotation systems, improved ploughing techniques, and livestock management practices that maximize productivity in temperate European climates. Iron tools enable the construction of field boundaries, drainage systems, and storage facilities that increased agricultural efficiency and food security. Celtic craftsmen achieved remarkable levels of specialization in various trades, including metalworking, pottery production, textile manufacturing, and woodworking. The quality of Celtic craftsmanship, particularly in metalwork, equaled or exceeded contemporary products from more established civilizations, while distinctively Celtic artistic traditions created unique cultural expressions that influenced European art for centuries to come. The Celtic expansion across temperate Europe had established sophisticated Iron Age societies from the Atlantic to the Carpathians. But beyond the Rhine and Danube rivers in the vast forests and plains of northern Europe, different groups were developing their own distinctive approaches to iron technology and social organization. The Germanic peoples emerging from the complex interactions between indigenous Bronze Age populations and migrating groups from Scandinavia and the Eastern Baltic created cultural traditions that would fundamentally reshape the political landscape of Europe. During the final centuries B and the early centuries AD, the Yasv culture, which archaeologists recognize as the earliest clearly Germanic cultural complex, emerged around 500 BC in the regions between the Ila and Oder rivers, encompassing much of modern northern Germany and southern Denmark. Named after a cemetery site near Lundberg in Lower Saxony, the Yasv culture represented a synthesis of local Bronze Age traditions with innovations in iron technology, settlement organization, and burial practices that distinguished it from contemporary Celtic societies to the south. The Yasv settlements differed markedly from the fortified hill forts characteristic of Celtic territories. Germanic communities typically established their villages in river valleys and coastal plains, constructing long houses that could accommodate extended families, along with their livestock and stored grain. These structures, measuring up to 30 meters in length, featured timber frameworks filled with BLE and daub walls, while their roofs were thatched with straw or reed. Archaeological excavations at sites like Fieden 5 in Lower Saxony have revealed long houses with sophisticated internal divisions that separated human living spaces from animal byres and storage areas. The ironwork traditions that developed within Yasv culture demonstrated clear technological competence while maintaining distinctive regional characteristics. Germanic smiths established their workshops within or adjacent to settlements rather than in specialized industrial centers, indicating that iron production was integrated into community life rather than controlled by centralized authorities. Excavations at Jaff period sites have uncovered furnaces designed for small-scale but efficient iron production, typically capable of processing local bog iron ores that were abundant throughout the North European plain. Bog iron formed through chemical precipitation in wetland environments required different processing techniques than the hard rock or exploited by Mediterranean civilizations. Germanic smiths developed specialized knowledge for identifying high-quality bog iron deposits and extracting the ore nodules from marshy ground. The smelting process involved roasting the bog iron to remove moisture and organic impurities before reduction in low-shay furnaces that operated at temperatures between 1100 and 1200 degrees. The distinctive cremation burial practices of Yasv culture provide crucial insights into Germanic social organization and religious beliefs. Unlike the elaborate inhumation burials characteristic of contemporary Celtic societies, Germanic communities typically cremated their dead and buried the ashes in ceramic urns within flat cemeteries. The grave goods accompanying these burials were generally modest, consisting primarily of personal ornaments, tools, and ceramic vessels rather than the weapons and imported luxury items found in Celtic elite burials. The standardization evident in Jastoff burial practices suggests relatively egalitarian social structures during the early Germanic Iron Age. While some burials contain more elaborate grave goods than others, The differences are far less pronounced than those observed in contemporary Celtic or Mediterranean societies. This pattern indicates that Germanic communities had not yet developed the pronounced social hierarchies that characterized their neighbors, though subtle distinctions in burial treatment suggest emerging differences in wealth and status. Germanic weapon technology during the Jastov period emphasized functionality over ornamentation, reflecting both the practical needs of warrior societies and the limited resources available for luxury production. Iron spearheads, typically measuring 20 to 30 cm in length, featured leaf-shaped blades designed for both thrusting and throwing attacks. The socket construction of these spearheads, where the iron blade was forged with a hollow socket to accommodate a wooden shaft, demonstrated sophisticated metalworking techniques adapted to Germanic tactical requirements. The development of Germanic shield construction incorporated both traditional materials and iron reinforcements that improve offensive capabilities. Archaeological evidence from weapon deposits in Danish bogs has preserved organic materials that normally decay, revealing wooden shields with iron boss reinforcements and rim bindings. These shields, typically measuring 60 to 80 centimeters in diameter, were constructed from planks joined with iron clamps and covered with leather or fabric facing that provided additional protection against weapon impacts. The preserve culture, which emerged in the regions of modern Poland during the 3rd century BC, represented another significant Germanic cultural complex that demonstrated sophisticated ironwork capabilities and extensive trade connections. Named after a cemetery site in southeastern Poland, the preserve culture extended from the Vistula River basin eastward into modern Ukraine and Belarus, creating a cultural bridge between Germanic and Slavic populations. Bavor settlements featured substantial timber buildings and evidence of specialized craft production that indicates more complex economic organization than earlier Germanic cultures. Archaeological excavations at sites like Jakus in southern Poland have revealed workshops for iron production, pottery manufacture, and textile production, suggesting that preserve communities supported specialized craftsmen who produced goods for both local consumption and regional trade networks. The iron technology of Preiser culture demonstrated clear advances over earlier Germanic traditions, with smiths producing weapons and tools of consistently high quality. Presorsk swords, typically measuring 60 to 70 cm in length, featured straight, double-edged blades with pronounced central ridges that provided structural strength while reducing weight. The metallurgical analysis of surviving examples reveals sophisticated heat treatment, techniques that created optimal hardness, distributions throughout the blade length. Przeworsk metalworkers also developed distinctive decorative techniques that combined iron construction with bronze and silver inlays. Belt fittings, fibula, and weapon accessories featured intricate geometric patterns executed in precious metal inlays that demonstrated both artistic sophistication and access to valuable raw materials. The technical requirements for producing these inlay decorations indicate that preserve craftsmen possessed advanced knowledge of metallurgical processes and decorative techniques. The relationship between Germanic tribes and the expanding Roman Empire became increasingly important during the 2nd and 1st centuries BC as Roman territorial expansion brought Germanic populations into direct contact with Mediterranean civilization. The Cimbrian War, which erupted in 113 BC when the Cimbrian Teutones migrated southward from their homelands in modern Denmark and the northern Germany, provided the first major test of Germanic military capabilities against Roman legions. The Germanic migration that triggered the Cimbrian War appears to have resulted from a combination of climatic deterioration, population pressure, and political instability in northern Europe. Archaeological evidence from Jutland indicates significant environmental stress during the late 2nd century BC, including flooding, crop failures, and abandonment of previously productive agricultural areas. These conditions forced substantial populations to seek new territories, creating the massive population movements that brought Germanic tribes into conflict with Rome. The Cimbrian Teutones, accompanied by allied tribes including the Amrones, represented a formidable military force. Equipped with iron weapons and organized according to Germanic warrior traditions, Roman sources describe these warriors as physically imposing fighters who employed tactics emphasizing individual combat prowess and psychological intimidation. Their weapons included long iron swords, spears, and distinctive shields decorated with bronze fittings and painted designs. The initial encounters between Germanic forces and Roman legions demonstrated the effectiveness of Germanic weapons and tactics against traditional Roman military formations. At the Battle of Arausio in 105 BC, a combined Germanic army virtually annihilated two Roman consular armies, killing an estimated 80,000 Roman soldiers and capturing vast quantities of military equipment. The Germanic victory resulted partly from their superior knowledge of local terrain and weather conditions, but also from the effectiveness of their iron weapons against Roman equipment. The Germanic tactical approach emphasized mobility and individual warrior skills, rather than the disciplined formation fighting that characterized Roman legions. Germanic warriors typically fought in loose formations that allowed skilled individuals to demonstrate their prowess while maintaining flexibility to respond to changing battlefield conditions. This tactical system required weapons that could function effectively in single combat, leading to the development of longer swords and spears than those used by Mediterranean armies. The eventual Roman victory over the Cimmerian Teutonus, achieved by Marius at the battles of Aqua, Sexy and Vicely in 102-101 BC, demonstrated Roman adaptability and the advantages of professional military organization over tribal warrior societies. However, the Germanic tribes' performance in these conflicts established their reputation as formidable opponents and influenced subsequent Roman military reforms and frontier policies. The establishment of Roman frontiers along the Rhine and Danube rivers during the 1st century BC created a permanent boundary between the Roman world and the Germanic territories beyond. This frontier zone became a region of intensive cultural and economic exchange, with Germanic tribes adopting Roman technologies and practices while maintaining their distinctive cultural identities. Archaeological evidence from sites along the Roman frontier reveals extensive trade in iron tools, weapons, and luxury goods that flowed in both directions across the imperial boundary. Roman military equipment and techniques influenced Germanic weapon development during the early imperial period. Germanic smiths began producing swords with longer blades and more sophisticated hilts that reflected Roman design influences, while maintaining distinctively Germanic decorative elements. The spar, a long cavalry sword that became standard equipment for Roman auxiliary units, appears to have originated from Germanic prototypes before being adopted by Roman forces. The development of Scandinavian Iron Age societies followed a somewhat different trajectory from the Germanic cultures of the North European plain. Though the two regions maintained extensive cultural and economic connections throughout the Iron Age period, the transition from Bronze Age to Iron Age in Scandinavia occurred gradually between 500 and 200 BC, with iron technology being adopted alongside continued bronze production for ceremonial and decorative purposes. The pre-Roman Iron Age in Scandinavia, spanning approximately 500 BC to 1 AD, witnessed significant developments in settlement organization, agricultural practices, and craft production that laid the groundwork for the later Viking Age expansion. Scandinavian communities during this period established substantial farmsteads and villages that supported specialized craft production, including sophisticated ironwork operations that produced tools and weapons for both local use and export to other regions. The bog deposits of Denmark and southern Sweden have preserved exceptional evidence of Scandinavian Iron Age material culture, including complete weapons, tools, and even textiles that provide detailed insights into technological capabilities and artistic traditions. The Weisspring boat discovered in a bog on the Danish island of Al represents the earliest known Scandinavian warship and demonstrates the maritime technologies that would eventually enable Viking expansion throughout the North Atlantic. The Weisspring boat, dating to approximately 350 BC, measured 19 meters in length and could accommodate a crew of 20 warriors. The vessel's construction technique, involving sewn planks joined without nails or metal fittings, represented a sophisticated understanding of naval architecture adapted to Scandinavian conditions and materials. The boat was discovered alongside weapons and military equipment that had been deliberately deposited as offerings, providing insights into both maritime technology and religious practices. Scandinavian shipbuilding techniques during the Iron Age incorporated innovations that would prove crucial for later Viking expansion. The development of clinker construction, where overlapping planks were joined with iron rivets, created vessels that combined flexibility with strength, enabling them to withstand the stresses of ocean voyaging. Iron tools, particularly specialized shipbuilding adzes and orugas, enabled more precise woodworking and improved hull construction techniques. The agricultural intensification that occurred throughout Northern Europe during the Iron Age was largely dependent on the adoption of iron tools that could work the heavy, fertile soils of the region more effectively than bronze implements. Iron plowshares enabled Germanic and Scandinavian farmers to cultivate previously marginal lands, while iron axes facilitated forest clearance that expanded the area available for agriculture. Archaeological evidence from numerous sites indicates substantial population growth throughout northern Europe during the Iron Age, supported by increased agricultural productivity made possible by iron technology. Settlement surveys in regions like Jutland and the North German Plain reveal dramatic increases in site numbers and sizes between 500 BC and 200 AD, indicating that Iron Age agricultural techniques could support much larger populations than previous technological systems. The development of crop rotation systems and improved livestock management practices accompanied the adoption of iron agricultural tools throughout northern Europe. Iron tip plows could create deeper furrows that improved soil aeration and water retention, while iron sickles and scythes enabled more efficient harvesting of grain crops. The construction of field boundaries, drainage systems, and storage facilities required iron tools for cutting timber and shaping stone, supporting the development of more intensive agricultural systems. The social and political changes that accompanied agricultural intensification in northern Europe created conditions favorable for the development of more complex political organizations. The wealth generated by improved agricultural productivity supported the emergence of warrior elites who could afford iron weapons and armor, while the need to organize agricultural labor and defend territorial boundaries encouraged the development of larger political units than the small kinship groups that had characterized earlier periods. The gradual development of Germanic tribal confederations. During the early centuries, AD represented a significant evolution in political organization that would have profound implications for the Roman Empire and subsequent European history. These confederations, including groups like the Alemanni, Franks, and Saxons, combined multiple smaller tribes under the leadership of successful war leaders who could organize military campaigns and negotiate with Roman authorities. The military effectiveness of these Germanic confederations resulted partly from their adoption of improved iron weapons and armor, but also from their development of tactical systems that combined traditional Germanic warrior skills with innovations learned through contact with Roman forces. Germanic armies of the later imperial period employed more disciplined formations than their predecessors, while maintaining the individual combat skills that had characterized earlier Germanic warfare. The production of weapons and armor for these larger military organizations required more sophisticated ironwork capabilities than had been necessary for earlier tribal societies. Archaeological evidence from sites like Illerup in Denmark reveals weapon deposits containing hundreds of spears, swords, and shield fittings that demonstrate both the scale of Germanic military equipment production and the standardization that enabled large-scale warfare. The Germanic confederations that had emerged along Rome's northern frontiers represented just one manifestation of Iron Age, technological and social development that was simultaneously transforming societies across the vast expanse of Asia, from the windswept steppes of Central Asia to the monsoon-drenched plains of the Indian subcontinent. Diverse populations were adapting iron technology to their specific environmental conditions and cultural traditions, creating distinctive civilizations that would profoundly influence the course of world history. The Saiyan peoples who dominated the Eurasian steppes from the 8th to 3rd centuries BC developed perhaps the most distinctive and influential nomadic culture of the ancient world, emerging from the grasslands north of the Black Sea and extending their influence from the Danube River to the borders of China. The Saiyans created a sophisticated pastoral society that combined exceptional mobility with advanced metallurgical techniques and distinctive artistic traditions. Their mastery of iron technology, particularly in weapons production and horse equipment, enabled them to establish dominance over vast territories and maintain complex relationships with the sedentary civilizations along their borders. The archaeological site of Arzan in the Tuva Republic of southern Siberia has provided extraordinary insights into early Scythian culture and technology. The massive burial mounds or Kyrians at Arzan date to the 8th and 7th centuries BC and contain the remains of Scythian nobles accompanied by hundreds of horses, elaborate gold ornaments, and sophisticated iron weapons. The preservation conditions in these frozen tombs have maintained organic materials, including leather, textiles, and wooden objects that normally decay, offering unprecedented glimpses into Saiyan daily life and technological capabilities. The iron weapons discovered at Arjun demonstrate the advanced metallurgical skills of early Saiyan smiths. Iron arrowheads, typically measuring 3 to 5 centimeters in length, featured barbed designs specifically adapted for hunting and warfare from horseback. The socketed construction of these arrowheads, where the iron point was forged with a hollow socket to accommodate wooden shafts, required precise temperature control and sophisticated forging techniques. Analysis of surviving examples reveals consistent carbon content and heat treatment that produced optimal hardness for penetrating both animal hide and human armor. Scythian sword production represented another significant achievement in steppe metallurgy. The characteristic akin, a short sword measuring 40 to 60 centimeters in length, featured a straight, double-edged blade with a distinctive crossguard and pommel design. These swords were specifically designed for mounted combat with their compact size, allowing effective use from horseback while their robust construction could withstand the stresses of cavalry warfare. The metallurgical analysis of preserved examples reveals sophisticated techniques for creating differential hardness with hard, cutting edges and flexible cores that prevented catastrophic blade failure during combat. The development of Saiyan horse equipment incorporated iron technology in ways that revolutionized steppe warfare and pastoral management. Iron bits, with their superior durability compared to bronze equivalents, enabled more effective control of horses during combat and long-distance travel. The complex curb bits discovered in Scythian burials feature articulated designs with multiple joints and leverage systems that provided riders with precise control over their mounts. The production of these sophisticated pieces required advanced knowledge of iron forging and finishing techniques. Scythian stirrups, among the earliest known examples of this crucial equestrian innovation, incorporated iron reinforcements that provided structural strength while maintaining the flexibility necessary for comfortable riding. Archaeological evidence suggests that Scythian metalworkers developed stirrup technology several centuries before its appearance in other regions, giving Scythian cavalry significant tactical advantages over opponents who fought without stirrups. The ability to maintain stable seating while using weapons from horseback transformed the effectiveness of mounted warfare throughout the ancient world. The distinctive animal-style art that characterized Saiyan culture found its most sophisticated expression in metalwork that combined gold, bronze, and iron in elaborate decorative schemes. Saiyan artists developed stylized representations of steppe animals, including deer, eagles, wolves, and big cats that adorned weapons, horse equipment, and personal ornaments. The technical requirements for producing these complex designs required exceptional skill in multiple metallurgical techniques, including casting, forging, chasing, and inlay work. The famous Scythian gold pectoral from Tovsta Mahila in Ukraine exemplifies the artistic and technical achievements of steppe metal workers. This elaborate chest ornament dating to the 4th century BC features 3 registers of animal and human figures executed in repousse technique with extraordinary attention to detail. While the pectoral itself is gold, many of the tools and techniques used in its production were iron-based, demonstrating the integration of iron technology into all aspects of Saiyan craft production. Saiyan settlements, though less extensively studied than their burial monuments, reveal sophisticated approaches to iron production adapted to nomadic lifestyles. The fortified settlement at Belk in Ukraine, covering over 4,000 hectares and dating to the 73 Rad centuries BC, contained extensive ironworking areas with furnaces designed for portable operation. These installations could be dismantled and relocated as communities moved seasonally between pastures, enabling continuous iron production despite the mobile nature of Saiyan society. The iron production techniques developed by Saiyan smiths emphasized efficiency and portability over maximum output. Saiyan furnaces typically operated as small bloomeries that could process local iron or using readily available fuel sources. The bloomer process produced spongy iron masses that required extensive forging to consolidate into usable metal. But this approach allowed smiths to work with whatever materials were available in their immediate vicinity, rather than depending on specialized mining operations. The Smateian peoples who succeeded Scythian dominance of the western steppes during the 3rd century BC maintained many technological traditions while developing their own distinctive innovations in iron technology and military equipment. The Smashians, originating from the regions east of the Dawn River, gradually displaced Scythian populations westward while adopting and adapting many aspects of Scythian material culture. Archaeological evidence from Sarmatian sites reveals continued development of steppe metallurgical traditions, with increasing emphasis on heavy cavalry equipment and defensive armor. Sarmatian weapon technology emphasized longer, heavier swords designed for use by heavily armored cavalry. The characteristic Sarmatian spatha, measuring 70 to 100 centimeters in length, featured a straight double-edged blade with a pronounced central ridge that provided structural strength while reducing weight. These swords required advanced metallurgical techniques to create blades that combined flexibility with cutting power, as their length made them susceptible to bending or breaking under combat stress. The development of Sarmatian-scale armor represented a significant innovation in steppe military technology. Archaeological excavations at sites like Kasika in the lower Volga region have uncovered complete sets of iron-scale armor, consisting of hundreds of small overlapping plates joined with leather or textile backing. The production of scale armor required enormous quantities of iron and thousands of hours of skilled labor, indicating that Sarmatian society could support specialized armorer workshops that produced equipment for elite heavy cavalry units. Sarmatian horse armor, including iron chanfrons for protecting horses' heads and scalebarding for body protection, transformed steppe warfare by creating heavily armored cavalry units capable of charging disciplined infantry formations. The weight and complexity of this equipment required larger, stronger horses than those used by earlier steppe peoples, leading to selective breeding programs that produced the powerful war horses that would later influence medieval European cavalry development. The artistic traditions of Sarmatian metalworkers continued the animal-style motifs of their Scythian predecessors, while incorporating new influences from contacts with Roman, Parthian and Chinese civilizations. Submission gold work from sites like Novotcherkassk features polychrome inlay techniques that combined gold with garnets, turquoise, and other precious stones in designs that influenced later Germanic and Byzantine decorative arts. The technical sophistication required for these inlay techniques demonstrates the continued development of metallurgical skills within steppe societies. The expansion of steppe peoples into sedentary regions created opportunities for technological exchange that spread ironworking techniques across vast distances. Scion and Sarmatian metalworkers established workshops in Greek colonies along the Black Sea coast where they adapted their techniques to urban production requirements while maintaining their distinctive artistic traditions. The Greek city of Chessos in Crimea became a major center for the production of Scythian-style metalwork that combined steppe artistic motifs with Greek technical traditions. The influence of steppe iron technology extended far beyond the immediate regions of nomadic settlement. Trade networks that connected the steppes with China, India and the Mediterranean world facilitated the spread of metallurgical innovations, including stirrup technology, composite bow construction techniques, and specialized horse equipment. The famous Silk Road trade routes that linked east and west passed through territories controlled by steppe peoples, creating opportunities for technological diffusion that influenced civilizations across Eurasia. The development of iron technology in the Indian subcontinent followed a distinctly different trajectory from contemporary developments in the Mediterranean world and Central Asia. Archaeological evidence indicates that ironworking techniques reached the Indian subcontinent around 1000 BC, probably through contact with iron-producing regions in Central Asia or the Iranian plateau. However, Indian metal workers quickly developed their own distinctive approaches to iron production that took advantage of local or sources and environmental conditions. The earliest evidence of ironworking in India appears at sites in the Ganges River Valley, including at Transisera in Uttar Pradesh and Jakera in Rajasthan. These sites, dating to approximately 1800 BC, contain iron artifacts including tools, weapons, and agricultural implements that demonstrate local production rather than importation from other regions. The quality of these early iron objects suggests that Indian smiths had mastered the basic techniques of iron smelting and forging within a relatively short period after the technology's initial introduction. The abundant iron ore deposits of peninsular India, particularly in the regions that would later become Karnataka, Odisha and Jharkhand, provided the raw materials for extensive iron production that supported population growth and territorial expansion throughout the subcontinent. The high-grade hematite and magnetite ores found in these regions were ideally suited to the bloomer smelting techniques that Indian metalworkers developed, producing consistently high-quality iron that could be forged into superior tools and weapons. Indian ironworking techniques incorporated innovations that reflected the unique environmental conditions of the subcontinent. The monsoon climate, with its alternating wet and dry seasons, required different approaches to furnace construction and operation than those developed in Mediterranean or temperate European regions. Indian smiths developed furnace designs that could operate effectively despite high humidity and seasonal variations in fuel availability, often incorporating sophisticated air circulation systems that maintained optimal smelting conditions. The development of wood steel production in southern India represents one of the most significant metallurgical achievements of the ancient world. Wood steel produced through techniques that created high-carbon steel with distinctive crystalline structures demonstrated properties that surpassed contemporary iron and steel products from other regions. The production process involved melting iron with organic materials and sealed crucibles, creating steel ingots that could be forged into blades of exceptional sharpness and durability. The reputation of Indian steel extended throughout the ancient world, with wood steel ingots being exported to regions as distant as Damascus and Toledo, where local smiths forged them into weapons renowned for their quality. The famous Damascus steel blades that became legendary throughout the medieval world were actually produced from Indian wood steel using Middle Eastern forging techniques. The superiority of Indian steel resulted from the combination of high-quality OES, sophisticated smelting techniques, and the accumulated knowledge of generations of skilled metalworkers. Archaeological excavations at Kurumanal in Tamil Nadu have revealed extensive evidence of iron and steel production dating to the 3rd century BC through the 3rd century AD. The site contained numerous furnaces, anvils, and other metalworking equipment, along with large quantities of slag and other production debris that indicate large-scale operations. The discovery of crucible fragments containing steel residues provides direct evidence of the high-temperature processes used to produce the carbonite alloys that characterized Indian steel production. The integration of iron technology into Indian agricultural practices supported the demographic and territorial expansion that characterized the later Vedic period and the emergence of the great Indian empires. Iron plowshares enabled farmers to cultivate the heavy alluvial soils of the Ganges Valley more effectively than bronze implements, supporting the population densities necessary for urban development and complex political organization. The clearing of forests for agricultural expansion was facilitated by iron axes and other cutting tools that could work more efficiently than earlier bronze equipment. The Mauryan Empire, which reached its greatest extent under Ashoka in the 3rd century BC, benefited enormously from the military advantages provided by iron weapons and the economic foundation created by iron-based agriculture. Mauryan armies employed iron swords, spearheads, and arrowheads that gave them decisive advantages over opponents still equipped with bronze weapons. The administrative efficiency that enabled the Mauryans to control territories from Afghanistan to southern India depended partly on iron tools that facilitated road construction, fortification building, and other infrastructure projects. The Chinese adoption and development of iron technology occurred somewhat later than in Western regions, but proceeded with characteristic thoroughness and innovation. Archaeological evidence indicates that ironwork techniques reached China during the 8th century BC, probably through contact with Central Asian peoples who had acquired the technology from Western sources. However, Chinese metalworkers quickly developed distinctive approaches to iron production that incorporated innovations in furnace design, bellows systems, and casting techniques. The transition from Bronze Age to Iron Age in China occurred during the Eastern Zhou period, beginning around 770 BC with the establishment of the Zhou capital at Luoyang. This period witnessed fundamental changes in Chinese society, including the development of new philosophical schools, the emergence of territorial states, and the adoption of iron technology for both military and civilian purposes. The decentralization of political authority that characterized the Eastern Zhou period created competitive pressures that encouraged technological innovation and military development. Chinese iron production techniques incorporated several innovations that distinguished them from contemporary practices in other regions. Chinese smiths developed blast furnace technology that could achieve temperatures high enough to melt iron completely, enabling the production of cast iron objects that were impossible to create using bloomer techniques. The earliest Chinese blast furnaces dating to approximately 500 BC featured sophisticated air circulation, systems powered by water-driven bellows that maintained the high temperatures necessary for iron melting. The ability to cast iron enabled Chinese metalworkers to produce objects that would have been extremely difficult or impossible to forge, including complex agricultural tools, cooking vessels, and architectural fittings. Cast iron plowshares produced in standardized molds could be manufactured much more efficiently than forged equivalents while providing superior performance in Chinese agricultural conditions. The mass production capabilities of casting techniques supported the agricultural intensification that enabled China's growing population and territorial expansion. Chinese weapon technology during the Eastern Zhou period incorporated iron in ways that reflected both practical military requirements and the aesthetic traditions of Chinese craftsmanship. The characteristic Chinese sword known as a jian featured a straight double-edged blade with elaborate bronze or iron fittings that demonstrated the owner's wealth and status. The production of these swords required sophisticated techniques for joining iron blades with bronze hilts and creating the complex geometric patterns that decorated the finest examples. The development of crossbow technology in China during the 4th century BC represented a significant military innovation that incorporated iron components in crucial functional roles. Chinese crossbows featured iron triggers, stirrups, and bolt heads that provided superior performance compared to earlier all-bronze or all-wood designs. The mass production of crossbow bolts with standardized iron heads enabled Chinese armies to maintain consistent ammunition supplies during extended campaigns, providing significant tactical advantages over opponents equipped with individually crafted weapons. The philosophical schools that emerged during the Eastern Zhou period, including Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism, developed within the context of rapid technological and social change that included the widespread adoption of iron technology. These philosophical traditions addressed questions about social organization, political authority, and individual conduct that arose partly from the disruptions caused by technological innovation and military competition between rival states. The Confucian emphasis on social harmony and proper relationships reflected concerns about the social disruptions that accompanied technological change and political fragmentation. Confucian texts from the period reveal awareness that new technologies, including iron weapons and agricultural tools, were changing traditional social relationships and creating new forms of inequality and conflict. The Confucian solution emphasized education, moral cultivation, and proper governance as means of managing technological change while preserving social stability. The legalist school, which emphasized strict laws and centralized authority, developed administrative techniques that incorporated iron technology into state-controlled production systems. Legalist theorists like Shangyang and Hanf recognized that control over iron production and distribution could provide rulers with decisive advantages over their rivals. The Xin state's eventual unification of China under legalist principles was facilitated partly by its systematic control over iron production and its ability to equip large armies with standardized iron weapons. The role of iron technology in facilitating the expansion of agricultural societies throughout Asia cannot be overstated. In regions from the Indian subcontinent to northern China, iron tools enabled farmers to cultivate previously marginal lands, supporting population growth and territorial expansion that created the demographic foundation for great empires and complex civilizations. The superior cutting power and durability of iron implements made possible the forest clearance, soil preparation, and crop harvesting that sustained the agricultural surpluses necessary for urban development and specialized craft production. The development of the Silk Road trade networks during the 2nd century BC created unprecedented opportunities for technological exchange between the diverse civilizations of Asia. These trade routes, connecting China with Central Asia, India, and ultimately the Mediterranean world, facilitated the spread of metallurgical techniques, artistic styles, and technological innovations across vast distances. Iron tools and weapons moved along these routes alongside silk, spices, and precious stones, creating a continuous process of technological diffusion that influenced societies throughout Eurasia. The establishment of trading centers along the Silk Road routes required substantial investments in infrastructure that depended heavily on iron technology. The construction of caravan shrines, fortifications, and irrigation systems required iron tools for quarrying stone, cutting timber, and shaping building materials. The maintenance of these facilities over extended periods demanded continuous supplies of iron tools and replacement parts, creating economic opportunities for metal workers throughout the regions traversed by the trade routes. The sophisticated trade networks that had connected Asian civilizations through the Silk Road represented just one facet of Iron Age technological diffusion across the ancient world. Simultaneously across the vast continent of Africa, independent centers of iron production were emerging that would fundamentally transform the demographic, cultural, and political landscape of sub-Saharan regions. The development of iron technology in Africa occurred through processes that were largely independent of Mediterranean and Asian influences, creating distinctive metallurgical traditions that supported some of the most significant population movements and cultural transformations in human history. The Nok culture of central Nigeria represents the earliest known ironwork civilization in sub-Saharan Africa, with archaeological evidence indicating sophisticated metallurgical operations by 1000 BC, named after the village where the first artifacts were discovered in 1928. The Nosh culture extended across a vast area of the Yos Plateau and surrounding regions, encompassing territories that stretched from the Benue River Valley northward to the edges of the Sahel. The geographical extent of No influence, covering approximately 78,000 square kilometers, indicates a level of cultural integration and technological diffusion that required sophisticated communication, networks, and shared technological knowledge. Archaeological excavations at Nok sites have revealed furnace installations that demonstrate advanced understanding of iron smelting principles adapted to local conditions and materials. The furnaces discovered at sites like Taruga, dating to approximately 400 BC, featured cylindrical clay construction with internal diameters ranging from 50 to 60 cm and heights exceeding 1 meter. These installations incorporated sophisticated air circulation systems with multiple tuyers positioned at strategic points around the furnace circumference to ensure optimal oxygen flow during the smelting process. The clay used in No furnace construction was carefully prepared with organic temper that provided thermal shock resistance and structural integrity under the extreme temperatures required for iron reduction. Analysis of furnace fragments reveals temperatures exceeding 1200 degrees C achieved through the use of forced draft bellows, systems that maintained consistent airflow throughout extended smelting operations. The technical sophistication evident in these installations indicates that No metal workers have developed systematic approaches to iron production through generations of experimentation and refinement. The iron ore sources exploited by Nok smiths included both later deposits formed through tropical weathering processes and bog iron accumulations in seasonal wetlands. The latitic OES, characterized by high iron content and relatively low silica levels, were ideally suited to the bloomer smelting techniques that No metalworkers employed. Archaeological surveys have identified numerous ore extraction sites throughout No territory, with evidence of systematic mining operations that removed substantial quantities of ore for processing at centralized smelting locations. The tools and weapons produced by No smiths demonstrate metallurgical capabilities that equaled or exceeded contemporary ironworking traditions in other regions. Iron hoes, axes, and knives found at No sites show evidence of sophisticated forging techniques that created optimal hardness distributions for specific functional requirements. Agricultural implements featured hard cutting edges with softer, more flexible cores that prevented catastrophic failure during use, while weapons incorporated design elements that maximize penetrating power and structural durability. The famous Nokrakota sculptures, which have made the culture renowned throughout the archaeological world, were produced using iron tools that enabled unprecedented precision in clay modeling and surface finishing. The sculptural tradition that emerged within No culture created life-sized human figures with elaborate hairstyles, jewelry, and clothing that demonstrate sophisticated artistic capabilities and complex social organization. The production of these sculptures required iron tools for clay preparation, detailed carving, and surface texturing that would have been impossible to achieve using stone or bronze implements. The social implications of No terracotta art suggest the existence of specialized craft production systems that could support artists dedicated to create non-utilitarian objects. The technical requirements for producing large-scale terracotta sculptures included knowledge of clay composition, firing techniques, and structural engineering that prevented cracking or collapse during the drying and firing processes. The investment of resources required for these artistic productions indicates that No society had developed economic systems capable of generating surpluses sufficient to support specialized artistic activities. The distribution of Nok artifacts across central Nigeria reveals trade networks that connected iron-producing centers with communities throughout the region. Iron tools and weapons, found at sites hundreds of kilometers from known smelting locations, indicate systematic distribution systems that spread no technological innovations across diverse ecological zones. The standardization evident in many no-iron implements suggests organized production systems that could maintain consistent quality standards across multiple workshops and production centers. The environmental context of no-iron production involved the systematic exploitation of forest resources for fuel and the development of agricultural systems that could support concentrated populations engaged in specialized craft production. The Jos Plateau region, with its abundant iron ore deposits and forest cover, provided ideal conditions for iron production, while the surrounding savanna zones offered opportunities for agricultural expansion using iron tools. Archaeological evidence indicates that no communities cleared substantial forest areas for both fuel production and agricultural development, creating landscape modifications that persisted for centuries. The decline of Nok culture around 300 AD coincided with broader environmental and demographic changes that affected much of the West African Sudan. Climate fluctuations during the late 1st millennium AD created conditions of increased aridity that may have disrupted the agricultural systems that supported Nok population concentrations. However, the technological innovations developed within No culture, particularly ironworking techniques and agricultural practices, continue to influence subsequent developments throughout the region. The Bantu expansion represents one of the most significant demographic and cultural transformations in African history, involving the gradual spread of Bantu-speaking populations from their original homeland in the Bar Cameroon-Nigeria border region across most of Central, Eastern and Southern Africa. This expansion, which began around 1000 BC and continued for over a millennium, was closely associated with the spread of iron technology, agricultural innovations, and distinctive cultural practices that fundamentally transformed the societies and landscapes of sub-Saharan Africa. The original Bantu homeland, located in the grasslands and forest margins of modern Cameroon and southeastern Nigeria, provided environmental conditions that favored the development of mixed farming systems, combining crop cultivation with livestock management. Archaeological evidence from early Bantu sites indicates that these communities had developed sophisticated agricultural techniques using iron tools by approximately 1000 BC, enabling them to achieve population densities that exceeded the carrying capacity of their original territories and encouraging expansion into new regions. The initial phases of Bantu expansion involved movement eastward along the northern margins of the equatorial forest, with early Bantu communities establishing settlements in the Ubangi River Valley and the northern edges of the Congo Basin. These pioneering communities carried with them ironwork knowledge, agricultural techniques, and cultural practices that enabled them to adapt successfully to new environmental conditions while maintaining their distinctive identity. Archaeological sites dating to the early 1st millennium BC in the Central African Republic and southern Chad contain iron artifacts and pottery styles that demonstrate clear connections to the original Bantu homeland. The iron technology carried by expanding Bantu communities included both the technical knowledge necessary for ore identification and smelting, and the social organization required to support specialized metalworking activities. Bantu smiths developed furnace designs adapted to the diverse ore types and fuel sources encountered during their expansion, creating regional variations in smelting techniques while maintaining core technological principles. The portability of ironworking knowledge enabled Bantu communities to establish independent production centers wherever suitable OES and fuel sources were available. The agricultural systems developed by Bantu communities incorporated iron tools in ways that maximize productivity in tropical African environments. Iron hoes and axes enabled more efficient forest clearance and soil preparation, and stone tools, while iron knives and sickles improved harvesting efficiency for both wild and domesticated plants. The development of yam cultivation, which became a staple crop throughout much of Bantu Africa, was facilitated by iron digging tools that could penetrate hard soils and extract tubers without damage. The expansion of Bantu communities southward through the equatorial forest regions required adaptations to environmental conditions that differed significantly from their original savanna homeland. The dense forest canopy, high humidity, and different soil types of the Congo Basin presented challenges that Bantu settlers overcame through innovations in agricultural techniques, settlement organization, and technological adaptation. Iron tools proved particularly valuable for forest clearance, enabling Bantu communities to create agricultural plots within the forest environment. Archaeological evidence from early Bantu sites in the equatorial forest reveals sophisticated approaches to environmental management that combined controlled burning, selective tree removal, and soil enrichment techniques. Iron axes enabled precise tree felling that created optimal light conditions for crop growth, while iron hoes facilitated soil preparation in the challenging conditions of forest soils. The development of plantain and banana cultivation within forest clearings provided reliable food sources that supported permanent settlement in previously uninhabited regions. The emergence of early ironwork sites in the Great Lakes region of East Africa, including locations in modern Uganda, Rwanda, and western Tanzania, demonstrates the eastward expansion of Bantu communities and the iron technology during the early centuries AD. Sites like Kataruka in western Uganda, dating to approximately 400 AD, contain evidence of sophisticated iron production, including furnaces, slag heaps, and finished iron tools that indicate well-established metallurgical traditions. The quality and quantity of iron artifacts from these sites suggest that Bantu metalworkers had successfully adapted their techniques to East African sources and environmental conditions. The interaction between expanding Bantu communities and indigenous populations throughout Central and Eastern Africa create opportunities for technological exchange and cultural synthesis that enrich both groups. Archaeological evidence indicates that Bantu iron working techniques were adopted by indigenous communities in many regions, while Bantu settlers incorporated local knowledge about environmental conditions, wild food sources, and specialized hunting techniques. These interactions created hybrid cultures that combined elements of both Bantu and indigenous traditions. The expansion of Bantu communities into southern Africa during the early centuries AD brought iron technology to regions that had previously relied on stone tool technologies. The archaeological site of Broodistrum in South Africa, dating to approximately 300 AD, provides evidence of early Bantu settlement with ironworking capabilities, pottery traditions, and agricultural practices that demonstrate clear connections to northern Bantu communities. The establishment of iron production in southern Africa enabled population growth and territorial expansion that would continue for centuries. The development of cattle-keeping traditions within expanding Bantu communities created new demands for iron tools and transformed both economic systems and social organization. Iron spearheads and knives became essential equipment for cattle management, while iron tools enabled the construction of cattle enclosures and the processing of animal products. The integration of cattle keeping with crop cultivation created mixed farming systems that could support larger populations and more complex social hierarchies than either strategy alone. The role of iron tools in enabling Bantu agricultural expansion cannot be overstated. Iron hoes proved particularly effective for cultivating the diverse soil types encountered across Sub-Sahara and Africa. From the lateric soils of the forest regions to the sandy soils of the savas and the clay soils of river valleys, the superior cutting power and durability of iron tools enabled Bantu farmers to clear new agricultural land more efficiently and to maintain productive fields over longer periods than would have been possible using stone implements. The development of iron-based agricultural systems supported population densities that enable the emergence of more complex political organizations throughout Bantu Africa. Archaeological evidence from sites like Sanga in the Democratic Republic of Congo, dating to approximately 8,000 and 1,000 AD, reveals social stratification and craft, specialization that indicate the development of chiefdom-level political organization. Elite burials at Sanga contain elaborate iron weapons, copper ornaments, and imported goods that demonstrate the concentration of wealth and the development of long-distance trade networks. The establishment of ironworking centers throughout Bantu Africa created networks of technological exchange that spread innovations across vast distances. Specialized smelting techniques developed in one region were transmitted to other areas through the movement of skilled smiths, intermarriage between communities and trade relationships that connected distant settlements. The standardization evident in many iron tool types across different regions indicates systematic knowledge transmission and shared technological traditions. The environmental impact of Bantu iron production and agricultural expansion transformed landscapes throughout Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa. Forest clearance for both fuel production and agricultural development created new ecological conditions that favored different plant and animal communities. Archaeological evidence indicates that Bantu communities manage these environmental changes through sophisticated fire management techniques, selective species protection, and rotational land use systems that maintained long-term productivity. The social organization required for iron production within Bantu communities created new forms of specialization and hierarchy that influenced political development throughout the region. Skilled smiths occupied important positions within Bantu societies, often enjoying special status and ritual responsibilities that reflected the perceived magical properties of ironworking. The knowledge required for successful iron production was typically transmitted through kinship networks and apprenticeship systems that created hereditary craft specializations. The integration of iron technology into Bantu religious and ritual practices created symbolic associations that persisted throughout subsequent African history. Iron objects were incorporated into ceremonial contexts, divination practices, and initiation rituals that reinforced their social significance beyond their practical utility. The transformation of iron ore into finished tools through the controlled application of fire was interpreted within many Bantu cultures as a process analogous to human reproduction and spiritual transformation. The development of trade networks connecting Bantu iron-producing communities with other regions of Africa facilitated the exchange of raw materials, finished goods and technological knowledge that enriched all participating societies. Iron tools and weapons produced in Bantu workshops were traded for copper, salt, ivory and other valuable commodities, creating economic relationships that extended across ecological boundaries and cultural divisions. These trade networks provided the foundation for the complex commercial systems that would later support great African kingdoms and empires. The linguistic evidence for Bantu expansion includes the reconstruction of Proto-Bantu vocabulary related to iron-working agriculture and animal husbandry that demonstrates the central importance of these technologies in early Bantu society. The presence of shared ironwork, terminology across diverse Bantu languages, indicates that metallurgical knowledge was part of the common cultural heritage that expanding Bantu communities carried with them throughout their migrations. The development of regional variations in ironwork vocabulary reflects the adaptation of Bantu technological traditions to local conditions and materials. The archaeological record of Bantu expansion reveals a gradual process of cultural and technological diffusion rather than rapid conquest or displacement of indigenous populations. Early Bantu sites typically show evidence of small-scale settlements with limited material culture, suggesting that initial expansions involved relatively small groups who established new communities through peaceful interaction with existing populations. The gradual increase in site sizes and material complexity over time indicates successful adaptation and population growth within new territories. The success of Bantu expansion was fundamentally dependent on the technological advantages provided by iron tools and weapons, which enabled Bantu communities to exploit environmental resources more efficiently than Stone Age populations, and to defend their territories against potential competitors. However, the expansion also required sophisticated social organization, environmental knowledge, and cultural adaptability that enabled Bantu communities to establish successful settlements across diverse ecological conditions throughout sub-Saharan Africa. The technological mastery that had enabled Bantu communities to transform the landscapes of sub-Saharan Africa through iron-based agriculture and metallurgy was simultaneously revolutionizing. Another civilization that would come to dominate the Mediterranean world and much of Europe. On the Italian peninsula, the Roman Republic was developing military and engineering capabilities that would prove unmatched in the ancient world. Built upon systematic exploitation of iron technology and innovative approaches to standardization, logistics, and territorial administration. The early Roman Republic inherited metallurgical traditions from their Etruscan neighbors and Greek colonists in southern Italy. But Roman military demands and territorial ambitions drove innovations in iron production that exceeded anything achieved by previous Mediterranean civilizations. The establishment of Roman hegemony over the Italian peninsula during the 4th and 3rd centuries BC required the systematic production of standardized weapons and equipment for increasingly large armies, creating pressures for technological innovation and industrial organization that transformed Roman society and economy. The Roman military revolution began with the adoption of manipul tactics during the 4th century BC, replacing the earlier phalanx system inherited from Greek military traditions. The manipul system divided Roman legions into smaller tactical units called maniples, each consisting of 120 men equipped with standardized weapons and armor. This tactical innovation required unprecedented quantities of iron weapons produced to consistent specifications, driving the development of specialized workshops and quality control systems that ensured battlefield effectiveness. The Roman gladius, the short sword that became synonymous with legionary warfare, represented a masterpiece of practical weapon design optimized for close combat in disciplined formations. Measuring approximately 60-70 centimeters in length, the gladius featured a straight double-edged blade with a pronounced point designed for thrusting attacks. Archaeological analysis of surviving examples reveals sophisticated metallurgical techniques that created blades with hard cutting edges and flexible cores, achieving optimal performance characteristics through careful control of carbon content and heat treatment. Roman weapon production during the Republic period incorporated systematic approaches to standardization that enabled mass production while maintaining consistent quality. Archaeological excavations at Roman military sites have uncovered workshop areas with evidence of specialized tool production, including dies and templates used to ensure dimensional consistency across multiple production runs. The standardization of weapon specifications enabled Roman armies to maintain supply chains that could equip legions deployed across vast territories with interchangeable equipment and replacement parts. The pilum, the heavy javelin that served as the primary missile weapon for Roman legionaries, demonstrated innovative design principles that maximize battlefield effectiveness through clever metallurgical engineering. The pill featured a long iron shank attached to a wooden shaft, with the iron portion designed to bend upon impact to prevent enemy reuse. This design required precise control of iron hardness, with the shank forged to specific flexibility parameters that ensured consistent performance across different production batches. Roman armor production evolved from simple mail shirts to sophisticated segmented armor systems that provided superior protection, while maintaining mobility and comfort during extended campaigns. The lara segmentata, which became standard equipment for legionaries during the 1st century AD, consisted of iron plates joined with bronze hinges and leather straps in a design that distributed weight evenly across the soldier's torso. The production of segmented armor required advanced metalworking techniques, including precise cutting, forming, and joining of multiple iron components. The engineering achievements that enabled Roman territorial expansion and urban development depended fundamentally on iron tools that exceeded the capabilities of any previous civilization. Roman engineers developed specialized iron tools for construction, surveying, and infrastructure development that enabled the systematic conquest and administration of territories stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia. The precision and durability of Roman iron tools supported construction projects of unprecedented scale and complexity. Roman road construction, which created transportation networks that facilitated military movement and commercial exchange throughout the empire, required iron tools capable of cutting through diverse terrain types and geological formations. Roman road builders used iron picks, shovels, and cutting tools to excavate roads, quarry stone, and shape-building materials with precision that ensured consistent road quality across thousands of kilometers. The Via Appia, constructed beginning in 312 BC, demonstrated Roman engineering capabilities that depended entirely on superior iron tool technology. The construction techniques developed for Roman roads incorporated innovations that maximized durability and load-bearing capacity through systematic use of iron tools and fittings. Roman engineers used iron measuring instruments to ensure precise gradients and alignments, while iron cutting tools enabled the shaping of stone blocks to exact specifications. Iron clamps and dowels joined masonry elements in ways that created structural integrity capable of supporting heavy military and commercial traffic for centuries. Roman aqueduct construction represented perhaps the most sophisticated hydraulic engineering achievement of the ancient world, requiring iron tools and techniques that enabled precise surveying, stone cutting, and pipe fitting across distances exceeding 100 kilometers. The Aquacardia, completed in 52 AD, transported water from mountain springs to Rome through a system of channels, bridges, and underground conduits that maintained consistent gradients over its entire 69-kilometer length. The precision required for such construction was achievable only through the use of advanced iron surveying instruments and cutting tools. The arch construction techniques that became characteristic of Roman monumental architecture depended on iron tools that could shape stone blocks to the precise tolerances required for structural stability. Roman stonemasons used iron chisels, points, and finishing tools that enabled them to create complex curved surfaces and fitted joints that distributed loads effectively throughout architectural structures. The Pantheon in Rome, with its massive concrete dome spanning 43 miles, required iron tools for both the precise stone cutting and the construction of the wooden forms used to shape the concrete during construction. Roman concrete technology, which enabled the construction of massive structures like the Colosseum and the baths of Caracalla, incorporated iron reinforcements and required iron tools for mixing, placement and finishing. Roman engineers developed hydraulic concrete formulations using volcanic ash that created structures of unprecedented durability, while iron tools enabled the precise placement and finishing that ensured optimal structural performance. The iron reinforcement techniques developed by Roman engineers anticipated modern reinforced concrete construction by over a millennium. The economic foundation of Roman territorial expansion rested on systematic exploitation of mineral resources throughout the Mediterranean world, with iron mining operations that exceeded the scale and sophistication of any previous civilization. Roman mining engineers developed techniques for deep shaft mining, hydraulic extraction, and ore processing that enable the exploitation of previously inaccessible deposits while maintaining consistent production levels over extended periods. The Roman iron mining operations in Britain, established following the conquest of 43 AD, transformed the economic landscape of the province while providing crucial raw materials for imperial military and construction needs. The Forest of Dean, with its abundant iron ore deposits, became a major production center that supplied iron throughout the Western Empire. Archaeological excavations have revealed Roman mining installations with sophisticated drainage systems, ore processing facilities, and transportation networks that moved finished iron products to military bases and urban centers throughout Britain. Roman mining techniques in Britain incorporated innovations that maximized ore extraction while minimizing labor costs and environmental impact. Roman engineers used water-powered machinery to operate bellows systems for smelting furnaces, while hydraulic mining techniques enabled the extraction of ore from hillside deposits using controlled water flows. The scale of Roman iron production in Britain is evident from the massive slag heaps that remain at sites like Lydney and Archaeological, indicating continuous operation over several centuries. The Spanish iron mines, particularly those in the regions that would become auras, and Leon provided another crucial source of high-quality iron ore for Roman military and civilian needs. Roman mining operations in Spain incorporated techniques learned from indigenous populations while introducing innovations in shaft construction, ventilation, and ore transportation. The iron mines at Las Medullas, while primarily famous for gold extraction, also produced substantial quantities of iron ore using hydraulic mining techniques that reshaped entire landscapes. The Noricum region, encompassing parts of modern Austria and Slovenia, became renowned throughout the Roman world for producing the highest quality iron and steel available to ancient metallurgists. Norran steel, known as fam noricum, was specifically sought after for weapon production due to its superior hardness and edge retention characteristics. Roman writers, including Pliny the Elder, praised Norran iron for its exceptional quality, while archaeological analysis has confirmed that Norran steel achieved carbon contents and microstructures that rivaled modern tool steels. The production techniques developed in Noricum incorporated innovations in furnace design and heat treatment that created steel with properties superior to contemporary products from other regions. Norran smiths developed quenching techniques using local water, sources that achieved optimal hardness distributions, while their forging methods created weapons and tools that maintained sharp edges through extended use. The reputation of Norran steel extended throughout the empire, with wealthy Romans specifically commissioning weapons and tools made from Norran iron. The social and economic impact of Roman iron production transformed communities throughout the empire, creating new forms of specialization, urbanization, and commercial exchange that connected distant regions through integrated production networks. Roman ironwork communities developed sophisticated guild systems that regulated training quality, standards, and commercial practices, while imperial administration provided legal frameworks that protected intellectual property and maintained trade relationships. The Roman approach to technology transfer and industrial development differed markedly from previous civilizations in its systematic integration of local knowledge with imperial standards and practices. Roman engineers and administrators worked to identify and exploit local resources while introducing standardized techniques and quality controls that ensured consistent production across diverse geographical and cultural contexts. This approach enabled the empire to maximize resource utilization while maintaining technological superiority over potential rivals. The decline of the Western Roman Empire during the 5th century AD occurred through complex processes that involved military pressure from Germanic tribes, economic disruption, and administrative breakdown that undermined the technological and organizational systems that had sustained Roman power. The loss of territorial control disrupted the supply chains that had provided iron ore and finished products to Roman armies and urban centers, while the breakdown of imperial administration eliminated the coordination that had enabled large-scale production and distribution. The Visigothic conquest of Spain in 418 AD severed Roman access to Spanish iron mines that had supplied the Western Empire for centuries, while the Vandal control of North African territories eliminated another crucial source of raw materials and finished goods. The progressive loss of mining regions forced the remaining Roman territories to rely on increasingly limited local resources, while the breakdown of transportation networks made it difficult to move materials and products between production centers and markets. The survival of the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, demonstrated the continued viability of Roman technological and administrative systems when supported by adequate resources and territorial control. Byzantine iron production continued to employ techniques developed during the earlier imperial period, while Byzantine engineers maintained the engineering capabilities that enabled continued construction of fortifications, aqueducts, and monumental architecture. The persistence of Roman technological traditions in the Eastern Empire provided continuity that would influence medieval European development for centuries. The transformation of Roman territories into Germanic kingdoms during the 5th and 6th centuries created opportunities for technological synthesis that combined Roman engineering knowledge with Germanic metallurgical traditions and social organization. The Ostrogothic kingdom in Italy maintained Roman administrative structures and technological capabilities while incorporating Germanic military traditions and political practices. Archaeological evidence from Ostrogothic sites reveals continued iron production using Roman techniques alongside distinctively Germanic weapon and tool designs. The Frankish kingdom that emerged in Gaul during the 5th century incorporated Roman ironwork techniques into Germanic social and political structures that emphasized warrior culture and decentralized authority. Frankish smiths produced weapons that combined Roman metallurgical sophistication with Germanic decorative traditions, creating hybrid technological traditions that would influence medieval European development. The famous pattern-welded swords produced by Frankish and other Germanic smiths represented technological achievements that equaled or exceeded Roman weapon-making capabilities. The Anglo-Saxon settlements in Britain during the 5th and 6th centuries established new ironwork traditions that combined techniques learned from Roman craftsmen with innovations adapted to local conditions and Germanic cultural preferences. Archaeological excavations at Anglo-Saxon sites have revealed ironwork installations that employed Roman furnace designs while producing distinctively Germanic weapons and tools. The continuity of iron production in post-Roman Britain enabled Anglo-Saxon communities to maintain technological capabilities that supported territorial expansion and political development. The Lombard conquest of northern Italy in 568 AD created another Germanic kingdom that maintained Roman technological capabilities while adapting them to Germanic social and political structures. Lombard smiths continued to produce iron tools and weapons using Roman techniques while developing distinctive artistic traditions that combined Germanic and Mediterranean influences. The preservation of Roman engineering knowledge within Lombard territories enabled continued maintenance of aqueducts, roads, and urban infrastructure that sustained economic activity and population concentrations. The legacy of Roman iron technology extended far beyond the chronological boundaries of the empire itself, influencing medieval European development through the preservation of technical knowledge, production techniques, and engineering capabilities within success states and religious institutions. Monasteries throughout former Roman territories maintained libraries that preserved Roman technical treatises, while monastic workshops continued to employ Roman ironwork techniques for construction and craft production. The Benedictine monasteries that spread throughout Europe during the 6th and 7th centuries became centers for technological preservation and innovation that maintained continuity with Roman traditions while adapting to medieval conditions. The technological preservation efforts of Benedictine monasteries represented just one facet of the complex transformation occurring across Europe and beyond as the classical Iron Age gradually gave way to what historians would later term the early medieval period. This transition, spanning roughly from 400 to 800 AD, involved not merely the political fragmentation of the Roman Empire, but fundamental changes in how societies organized production, understood technology, and conceptualized their relationship with the material world. The boundaries between Iron Age and medieval civilizations proved far more fluid than traditional periodization schemes suggest, with technological continuities persisting alongside dramatic social and cultural innovations. The gradual nature of this transformation becomes evident when examining the persistence of ironwork techniques across political boundaries and cultural divisions in the former Roman territories of Gaul. Frankish smiths continued operating workshops that employed furnace designs developed during the imperial period while incorporating decorative techniques derived from Germanic artistic traditions. Archaeological excavations at Merovingian sites like Lavoy in northeastern France have revealed ironwork installations that demonstrate clear technological continuity with Roman practices, including the use of water-powered trip hammers and sophisticated bellow systems that maintained consistent temperatures during extended smelting operations. The Frankish development of pattern welding techniques during the 6th and 7th centuries exemplified the technological synthesis occurring throughout post-Roman Europe. Pattern-welded sword blades created by forge welding multiple iron and steel rods together before folding and twisting the composite bar produced weapons with distinctive, watered patterns on their surfaces while achieving superior mechanical properties. Through the controlled distribution of carbonary and carbon poor iron, the production of pattern-welded blades required metallurgical knowledge that combined Roman understanding of heat treatment with Germanic innovations. In composite construction techniques, the technical sophistication of pattern welding demanded precise control over forge temperatures, timing of welding operations, and finishing techniques that could only be achieved through extensive experience and systematic knowledge transmission. Master smiths, who produced the finest pattern-welded weapons, commanded enormous respect within Germanic societies, often enjoying status comparable to nobles and receiving patronage from kings and warrior elites. The famous sword Graham from Norse mythology, described as having been reforged from fragments by the hero Sigurd, likely reflected actual pattern welding techniques that could restore damaged weapons to superior condition. Simultaneously, the eastern regions of the former Roman Empire witnessed different but equally significant technological developments that maintained classical traditions while adapting to changing political and economic conditions. The Byzantine Empire, centered on Constantinople, preserved Roman engineering capabilities while developing innovations in military technology, urban planning, and industrial organization that would influence European development for centuries. Byzantine iron production continued to employ techniques derived from Roman practices while incorporating innovations learned through contact with Persian, Arab, and Slavic neighbors. The construction of the Theodosian walls of Constantinople, completed around 450 AD, demonstrated the persistence of Roman engineering capabilities within the Byzantine Empire, while showcasing adaptations to new military technologies and siege techniques. The massive fortification system, featuring multiple defensive circuits with towers, gates, and artillery positions, required iron tools and fittings that exceeded anything produced during the earlier imperial period. Byzantine engineers developed specialized iron reinforcements for gate mechanisms, artillery mounts, and defensive installations that incorporated lessons learned from centuries of siege warfare. Byzantine Greek fire technology, developed during the 7th century AD, represented a significant innovation in military chemistry that required sophisticated metallurgical support systems. The delivery mechanisms for Greek fire, including siphons, pumps, and protective apparatus, incorporated iron components that had to withstand extreme temperatures and corrosive chemicals while maintaining operational reliability during combat. The production of these specialized devices required metallurgical techniques that pushed the boundaries of contemporary iron working capabilities. The rise of Islam during the 7th century created another major force for technological transformation that would profoundly influence ironworking traditions throughout the Mediterranean world and beyond. Islamic expansion brought Arab armies into contact with Persian, Byzantine, and Visigothic metallurgical traditions, creating opportunities for technological synthesis that produced innovations in steel production, weapon design, and industrial organization. The Islamic emphasis on learning and technological improvement provided institutional support for metallurgical research and development that advanced ironworking capabilities throughout the Islamic world. Damascus steel production, which reached its peak during the 8th and 9th centuries, represented one of the most significant metallurgical achievements of the early Islamic period. Damascus steel blades forged from wootz steel ingots imported from India achieved legendary sharpness and cutting ability through techniques that combined Indian raw materials with Middle Eastern forging expertise. The distinctive watered patterns visible on Damascus steel blades resulted from the controlled manipulation of carbide structures within the steel matrix, requiring metallurgical knowledge that would not be fully understood by modern science until the 20th century. The production of Damascus steel involved complex processes that began with the careful selection of wootz steel ingots based on their carbon content, impurity levels, and crystalline structure. Master smiths could identify superior wootz steel through visual inspection, sound testing, and preliminary forging trials that revealed the material's working characteristics. The forging process itself required precise temperature control with the steel, heated to specific temperatures that allowed carbide redistribution while preventing decarburization or grain growth that would compromise the blad's properties. Islamic metallurgical treatises from this period, including works by Al-Kindi and Al-Jazari, provide detailed descriptions of steel production techniques, furnace designs, and quality testing methods that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of metallurgical principles. These texts reveal that Islamic smiths had developed systematic approaches to steel production that incorporated empirical, observation-controlled experimentation and theoretical understanding of the relationships between composition, processing, and performance. The Crusades, beginning in the late 11th century, created extensive opportunities for technological exchange between Islamic and European metallurgical traditions. European knights who encountered Damascus steel weapons during the First Crusade were amazed by their superior cutting ability and edge retention, leading to efforts to acquire both finished weapons and the knowledge necessary for their production. The technological transfer that occurred during the Crusades influenced European sword making for centuries, with European smiths attempting to replicate the properties of Damascus steel using local materials and techniques. The agricultural revolution that transformed European productivity during the early medieval period depended fundamentally on improvements in iron tool technology that enabled more efficient cultivation of heavy northern European soils. The development of the heavy plough, featuring iron ploughshares, coulters, and mouldboards, revolutionized agricultural productivity in regions that had been only marginally productive under Roman cultivation methods. Archaeological evidence from sites throughout Northern Europe reveals the gradual adoption of improved iron agricultural tools during the 6th through 8th centuries, coinciding with population growth and territorial expansion. The iron ploughshare, designs that emerged during this period, incorporated innovations that maximized soil penetration and turning efficiency while minimizing wear and breakage during extended use. The asymmetrical mouldboard, which became standard on heavy ploughs by the 8th century, required sophisticated forging techniques that created complex three-dimensional curves optimized for soil flow characteristics. The production of mouldboards demanded metallurgical skills that combined traditional blacksmithing with specialized knowledge of agricultural requirements and soil mechanics. The three-field system of crop rotation that became widespread throughout Northern Europe during the 8th century required iron tools capable of intensive cultivation across larger areas than previous agricultural systems. Iron harrows, cultivators, and harvesting tools enabled farmers to manage the complex crop rotations and soil preparation techniques that maximize productivity while maintaining long-term soil fertility. The increased agricultural productivity achieved through these innovations supported population growth and urbanization that created markets for specialized craft production and long-distance trade. Monastic communities played crucial roles in preserving and developing iron-working technologies during the transition from classical to medieval periods. The Benedictine rule established by St. Benedict around 530 AD, emphasized manual labor alongside prayer and study, creating institutional frameworks that supported technological innovation and knowledge preservation. Monastic workshops throughout Europe became centers for iron production, agricultural tool development, and engineering projects that maintained continuity with classical traditions while adapting to medieval conditions. The monastery of Saint-Denis near Paris, founded in the 7th century, developed into a major center for metallurgical innovation that influenced French technological development for centuries. The monastery's workshops produced iron tools, weapons, and architectural fittings, using techniques that combined Roman engineering knowledge with Frankish metallurgical innovations. The famous iron hinges and fittings produced at Saint-Denis for the Abbey Church demonstrate metallurgical sophistication that equaled contemporary Byzantine and Islamic work while maintaining distinctively Frankish artistic characteristics. Irish monasteries, particularly those established during the 6th and 7th centuries, preserved classical learning while developing distinctive approaches to metallurgy that incorporated Celtic artistic traditions with Christian symbolism. The production of illuminated manuscripts at monasteries like Kells and Douro required iron tools for parchment preparation, ink production, and bookbinding that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of material science and chemical processes. The metalwork produced for liturgical purposes at Irish monasteries, including chalices, crosses, and reliquaries, achieved artistic and technical standards that rivaled contemporary Byzantine and Islamic examples. The Caroling Renaissance, initiated under Charlemagne during the late 8th century, created institutional support for technological development and educational reform that influenced European iron-working traditions for centuries. Charlemagne's palace school at Aachen became a center for learning that preserved classical texts while encouraging practical innovations in engineering, agriculture, and craft production. The standardization of weights, measures, and currency throughout the Carolingian Empire facilitated trade in iron goods, while encouraging technological diffusion across political boundaries. The capitula issued by Charlemagne and his successors included detailed regulations for craft production, quality standards, and technological education that demonstrate systematic approaches to industrial development. The Capitula de Velis, dating to around 800 AD, specified requirements for iron tools, agricultural equipment, and workshop facilities on royal estates throughout the empire. These regulations reveal sophisticated understanding of the relationships between technological capabilities, economic productivity, and political power that anticipated later medieval and early modern approaches to industrial policy. The Viking expansion that began during the 8th century represented another significant factor in technological diffusion throughout Northern Europe and beyond. Viking raids and trading expeditions created networks of cultural exchange that spread Scandinavian metallurgical innovations while incorporating techniques learned from contacted populations. The famous Viking ships that enabled their expansion required iron tools for construction, iron fittings for rigging and steering systems, and iron weapons for both offense and defense during their voyages. Viking weapon technology, particularly sword production, achieved remarkable sophistication during the 9th and 10th centuries through techniques that combined Scandinavian metallurgical knowledge with influences from Frankish, Anglo-Saxon, and Slavic traditions. The Ulfbert swords produced in Frankish workshops but widely used by Viking warriors demonstrate the international character of early medieval weapon production and the technological exchange that occurred through Viking trading networks. These swords, marked with the inscription plus VLF Bur plus T, achieved metallurgical properties that required crucible steel technology and sophisticated heat treatment techniques. The establishment of Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and North America created opportunities for technological adaptation that demonstrated the flexibility of Scandinavian ironworking traditions. Viking settlers in Iceland developed specialized techniques for processing bog iron, using local peat fuel sources while maintaining weapon and tool production capabilities that enabled successful colonization of previously uninhabited territories. The archaeological site at Lonzo Meadows in Newfoundland contains evidence of iron production using techniques adapted to local conditions and materials. The Slavic expansion throughout Eastern Europe during the 6th through 8th centuries created another vector for technological diffusion that spread ironwork techniques across vast territories from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Slavic metallurgical traditions incorporated influences from Germanic, Byzantine, and steppe peoples while developing distinctive approaches to iron production adapted to the forest environments of Eastern Europe. Archaeological excavations at early Slavic sites have revealed ironwork installations that employed local bog iron sources while producing tools and weapons that demonstrate clear technological competence. The emergence of the Kievan Rus during the 9th century represented a synthesis of Slavic, Scandinavian, and Byzantine influences that created new approaches to iron production and technological development. The strategic position of Kiev on the Dnieper River enabled control of trade routes connecting Scandinavia with Byzantium, facilitating technological exchange that enriched all participating cultures. Archaeological evidence from Kiev reveals ironworks that produced weapons and tools using techniques derived from multiple traditions while developing distinctive regional characteristics. The transformation of ironwork traditions during the transition from Iron Age to medieval periods involved not merely technological changes but fundamental shifts in how societies understood and organized craft production. The guild systems that emerged in many European cities during the 9th and 10th centuries created institutional frameworks for technological education, quality control, and commercial regulation that differed markedly from earlier Roman or Germanic approaches. These guilds preserved craft knowledge through apprenticeship systems, while encouraging innovation through competitive pressures and market demands. The artistic traditions that developed within medieval ironwork reflected the synthesis of classical, Germanic, and Christian influences that characterized European cultural development during this period. The decorative techniques employed on weapons, tools, and architectural fittings combined geometric patterns derived from Germanic traditions with figural representations influenced by classical and Christian iconography. The technical sophistication required for these decorative treatments demanded metallurgical skills that equaled or exceeded anything achieved during the classical period. As the 8th century drew to a close, the foundations had been established for the distinctive medieval civilization that would dominate European development for the next several centuries. The ironworking traditions that had emerged through the synthesis of classical Germanic and other influences provided the technological foundation for agricultural expansion, urban development, and territorial consolidation that would characterize the High Middle Ages. The institutional frameworks created by monasteries, royal administrations, and emerging guild systems ensured the preservation and continued development of metallurgical knowledge that would enable further technological advancement. The legacy of the Iron Age extended far beyond its chronological boundaries, influencing human civilization through technological innovations, social institutions, and cultural traditions that persisted for millennia. Throughout the ancient world, population growth, territory expansion, and cultural progress were encouraged by the development of more advanced engineering capabilities, more effective military technologies, and more efficient agriculture systems made possible by the mastery of iron metallurgy. The Iron Age's governmental structures, artistic traditions, and technological underpinnings served as the model for later civilizations, which built on these accomplishments while modifying them to meet new demands. The transition from Iron Age to medieval civilization was not a conclusion, but rather a continuation of human technological and cultural advancement, proving the lasting value of the discoveries made initially by ancient metalworkers who discovered how to extract iron from ore and forge it into instruments that would change the course of history